Hello, you gobbledygook. God damn it, that's cringe. Hello, I am Tony from Tony Two Tone, and thanks for tuning in to my very first video. A couple months back, I got the outright hankering to play classic RPG. I'd started feeling stagnant with the games I had been playing and wanted to play some of the undeniable classics of the genre. For my search, I realized that there was no real list of classic RPGs. There were lots of Reddit opinions and personal top 10s, but no definitive list. That's when I discovered the IGN Top 100 RPG list. Now, normally, IGN has about as much expertise on gaming as I do with pleasuring a woman, but this list was undeniably great. You buttfucker, get out of here! I then hopped over to YouTube to validate my opinion and saw that no one had done a video on this particular list, so I said, fuck it, why not? I could catalog my experience playing all the games from this list and give my opinion on each of the games I played. Think of it like a coffee shop punch card, but instead of getting a free coffee at the end, I got a shirt that says virginity rocks. Now, I know what you might be wondering. Who the fuck is this guy that I should care about his opinions? And you know what? That is undeniably a great fucking question. In my defense, I have had my fair share of gamer moments and even, dare I say, epic gamer moments. But if you like video game breakdowns from a man with the comedic sensibilities of a 19-year-old fraternity brother, you've come to the right place, partner. So let's get to it. Now, spoilers out of the way. I do not have infinite time and I am not Jesus Christ himself, so this is not a full breakdown of all 100 games. I plan to make this a multi-part series with each part covering 5 games starting with number 1 and working my way down. IGN ranked each game according to story, presentation, character progression, combat, and systems, which I think is pretty good, except for systems, which is fucking stupid. So I replaced it with characters, and this will be how I do my breakdowns of each game. Rating systems are a typical letter grade system going from F to S+, with each letter being capable of being plus or minus just to better place them against one another. Think of it like a tier list, but like 10 times worse. Also, I'm not enough of a Rain Man to do a number grade, so get that shit out of your skull. On this list, there are 3 MMORPGs, which stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. Holy fucking schmoly, dude. I literally just felt my value on the sexual marketplace go down like 8 tiers from that one sentence. In my opinion, these types of games are too far detached from the narrative RPGs I will be covering and rely too heavily on the player's social experience to fairly compare them to single-player games on this list. Essentially, it is outside the capabilities of my itty-bitty little limited hamster brain to compare the two. To alleviate this, I will replace these MMOs with other RPGs that have come out since this list was made in 2016. All these games are classics and could very well be S+ to anyone, however I am grading on a bit of a curve. What the fuck is he doing? So keep that in mind when the gamer rage starts to take over your body when I don't give your favorite game, fucking Orcs and Goblins, Nuts and Butts a perfect score. Any of these games could be their own extended video, but for time's sake, I'll keep it brief and include links to videos on each individual game from creators who I enjoy and who made great in-depth videos about each game. That also goes for the MMOs that I swapped out. Woo! Final fucking lead. Now, let's get started with our very first game. Actually, hold up. Future Tony here, ass blasting to the past. Sorry, coming through, sorry. I wanted to mention a few more things that I forgot. One is that these are all old classic games. There will be spoilers galore. I will not give spoiler warnings every single time I bring up a story beat, so treat this as a general spoiler warning. So, if you don't want to be spoiled for these games, then go, scream. Secondly, each game gets exactly 1 full playthrough. Them's the rules. 1 full playthrough, in and out, and that's that. I may go back and play a little a second time to get additional footage, but only 1 full front to back playthrough. Okay, now, let's get started with our first game.
Numero uno.
Chrono Trigger, a legendary game in the genre. Chrono Trigger was created by Square with artwork being done by the famous Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball fame, rest in peace, and was released in the year of our Lord, 1995, alongside, let's see, the OJ trial and the NATO bombing campaign. The good old days. From my own searches on the internet, it really is impossible to discuss the greatest RPGs without this one getting mentioned. I'm gonna be upfront and say this is the first time I've played this game. When I was a little younger, I remember I started this game, and then life got in the way, so this will be the first time I play it. front to back. There are many different versions of this game, and by many I mean about 3. The version I played is the OG on my totally real and totally legit Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Had to lug that bad boy out of storage, blow the metaphorical digital dust off, and fire up my physical console that I own, along with the physical copy of Chrono Trigger that I also happen to own. I mention this because there are other versions with slight differences, like the 3DS version and the Steam versions, which have additional content, but for the purpose of this video, I'm playing on the original, as God intended. Let's get started with the story. In my opinion, it's pretty good. I'm not going to go in depth about the plot, not really what these videos are for, rather I'm just going to talk about story beats I enjoyed from the plot, so keep that in mind for this and all the future games I talk about. Quick synopsis. A group of adventurers travel through time to prevent a global catastrophe. For Chrono Trigger, I think it does an impressive job about telling a story that heavily revolves around time travel without ever feeling convoluted or confusing. I have a chimp brain, so it was nice that I didn't ever feel like I was losing the plot, despite all that fucking Doctor Who bullshit going on. On top of that, the story feels concise and focused so that I never felt like the story was dragging whatsoever, except the very end, but I'll get to that. Every story beat felt fun and there were no plot points that I actively disliked. I especially like how each new story revelation directly led to an interesting new area to explore, whether that be the distant future, an alternative reality, or the prehistoric past. It was entertaining to see where the story was going to go and the new places it was going to take me. It never felt like it overplayed its hand and felt like it spent just the right amount of time in each area. This game feels so ahead of its time by including things like when your previous actions are referenced in the court scene, or the multiple endings you can unlock, that honestly, this does not feel like a dated game to play. Now that I got the good out of the way, let me address the bad. I absolutely hate it when games do a good job building up a villain just for you to beat them halfway through or before the end of the game and replace them with a godlike entity. It drives me fucking bonkers, dude. JRPGs are notoriously bad about this, and I just don't get it. I love Magus. The mystique and build-up towards his character were super interesting, especially the way it tied to Frog in his arc. The way that characters in the universe talked about Magus made him seem like a menacing threat that was dangerous to every inhabitant of the world we were in. Seeing his massive effect on different time periods also put the fear of God in you, and truly made it seem like Magus was an unstoppable force. Just overall, great build-up. Then we beat him and the game goes, actually, you have to fight literal God himself. It's like, oh, okay, fuck me, I guess. The game built me up to hate the creepy gay vampire lord, not whatever the fuck Lavos is. I mean, the actual fuck is he? He looks like a hemorrhoid. I just feel like I have no connection towards hating Lavos, except that apparently he is super duper evil and gonna destroy the world. I also seem to be in the minority with the opinion because everyone always talks about le epic parasite good. And while it is true that his design is pretty primo, he, they, it, Lavos doesn't feel especially unique. Just fits in the vein of big evil bad guys who want to destroy the world, just cuz. It's a little lame. Not a fan of that, but his boss fight absolutely fucks, so there's that. I'm not even against the idea of a universe-destroying threat, especially in a story that comprises multiple universes and time periods. It's kind of fitting to have a godlike threat that is going to destroy it all. I just wish it wasn't a mid-game twist, and that there was more build-up throughout the entire game to make me more invested in beating Lavos. Other than that, I despise the side quests. The quests themselves are fine, except for Robos. Holy fuck, I've never hated anything more than that godforsaken factory. I just hate they're all accessible right before the big showdown. It just feels like too intense of a change of pace, and it kind of throws off the stakes that were built. It's like, oh my god, Lavos is about to destroy the world, this is terrible. Anywho, I'm gonna go get myself involved in some side shenanigans to take care of a baby girl and the funny toad. I know the rationalization is that you are doing these side quests to acquire the power to beat Lavos, and they are technically optional. It's just that they're necessary to get the good ending, and they feel like important parts of the characters' stories. I just wish they were implemented in a better way rather than being all piled together at the same time at the very end. If they were dispersed throughout the entire game, I would have loved them. They add interesting bits of background to some characters who needed some fleshing out, like Luca. But yeah, overall, the story itself was great, I loved it, and I just think it could have been perfect with a few slight changes. Now, on to presentation. What do you want me to say? Akira fucking Toriyama. The look and atmosphere of this game really does feel immaculate. Everything from the character design to the enemies you fight, along with the beautiful animations, it's perfect. I literally wouldn't change a single thing about how it is presented. So instead, I'm just gonna gush some more. The music playing throughout the entire game might be some of my favorite video game music I have ever heard. Full stop. I've never played a game where my head was non-stop bobbing to the music playing in the background. The music for the prehistoric section especially stood out to me. I love traversing the map just to hear that music, which is something I don't think I can normally say. It all felt so fucking groovy, baby. It provides the perfect backdrop that gives this game energy. It has such a distinct feel to it, and every theme felt like it perfectly fit the area that it was based around. The sprite work is also amazing. It has that kind of sprite work that makes it feel so nostalgic, even though I have literally never played it before. It just has that sort of vibe to it. I also like how each weapon has its own sprite work. It gives each weapon you use a unique feel, even though they largely, for the most part, do the same thing. Enemy design is also top-notch. Toriyama has such an iconic style that even something as simple as a sewer rat has a fun design that is full of personality. I mean, look at this big dog. Boss designs are also great. They have an interesting mix of looking cool and dangerous while maintaining a distinct cartoony style. Overall, the presentation for this game is some of the best I've seen in the pixel art format. For character progression, it's pretty average. There isn't that much personalization that you can do for the characters. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are many characters in games that just are what they are, but that feels especially true for this game. The items that are present don't change the characters really at all, and it definitely feels like there's a right and wrong item to give certain characters. There are some accessories that can change the role of the character, but in general terms, this remains true. The characters themselves kind of serve as your typical archetypes, with some being magic focused like Marl, Luca, and Magus. Others are more physical focused like Robo and Ayla, and then there are some that are mixed like Chrono and Frog. The leveling up system is about what you'd expect for an older JRPG. You gain more health, and every few levels you learn a new move. Now there are some interesting aspects like the combo moves that you can unlock by fighting in battles with certain companions that can combine their turns together to do a stronger move. These were fun and added a bit of flair to the battles, but overall, progression is standard. The equipment you can find is a little bland, with each one just providing numerical bonuses to defense. It's just a bit boring, but there are some iconic weapons you can find which do feel cool and important in the game. For the most part, equipment and progression is just okay. Nothing that stands out from anything I've seen, but also, it isn't bad. It just kind of is. Simple and streamlined, but still a fun loop to level up, learn cool new move you spam, find better equipment, and rinse and repeat. As far as the level curve, it felt just right. The entire game I never felt like a god amongst little boys, but I also never felt like I was getting curb stomped by any rat that scurried up to me. All in all, progression is average. Now, onto the combat. Now we're fucking talking, my little gentle worms. Combat is pretty basic, not gonna lie, but the combination of the animation, music, and sound effects makes combat such a joy to partake. Such a joy? What am I, a fucking 87-year-old woman? Now, to be fair, Chrono Trigger does fall into the category of unlocking a new move by leveling up and spamming it until the next move you unlock, but it does enough extra things to make you forget that that's what you're doing. The combat being semi-real time adds to the pace of the battle. The weight bar adds a built-in timer, so even in the run-of-the-mill fights, you feel like there's a time crunch, and it adds stakes to every encounter. I also like the fluid motion in which combat starts. It is technically a random encounter, but the way that the enemies enter the fight screen feels so cool and unique. It doesn't feel like your typical random encounter. It's not just a flash of the screen, fight soundtrack, straight to battle, over and over and over. It's a fluid animation that shows the enemy approaching from real environments that you can physically see. This simple change makes the random encounter format 10 times more bearable. Also, little things like the change in animation for critical hits makes battles feel rewarding to watch and to play through, rather than just trying to bum rush through them to get to the next area. The feedback loop is very addicting and fun to play. Combat also tries to add some complexity and strategy by including directional attacks or area of effect attacks, which can hit multiple enemies based on positioning, but this feels limited and too luck based since you can't move your character. You just hope enemies are bunched up, and if they are, then yay, if not, then so be it, I guess. It doesn't add much complexity, but it adds some variation to the type of attack you will be using. That is until the end of the game where you have moves that just hit everyone on screen, so it doesn't matter at all. You also have the choice between text and magic, which both can have their own benefits depending on what you're fighting. Chrono Trigger feels like one of the few games where magic isn't completely busted. Characters like Ayla, who have no magic, feel just as useful as magic characters like Luca, who is more magic focused. The inclusion of dual text and triple text can also add a bit of variety to combat and adds an interesting strategic choice that you must make. Do you wait a little bit longer to combine 2 turns into one more powerful move, or do you have each character use their turn to do their own attack? Little variations and choices like these can add a level of depth to combat while simultaneously being simple and easy to pick up. All in all, while being basic on paper, Chrono Trigger provides enough extra goodies in battle that you can easily forget about how repetitive combat is, and it can become quite the fun loop. Finally, we have arrived at characters. And I gotta say, hot take incoming, the companions here? Pretty mid. Taco Bell sound effect. From online discourse, the way this group is talked about, I would have thought my team was made up of the fucking Sopranos. To caveat this a little bit, I absolutely love Magus and Frog, also our lovable titled mute invalid. However, the rest of the group just feels underwhelming. So, for Chrono Trigger and the rest of the games I talk about that include companions, I'm going to go over each one in ascending order from least favorite to favorite and give my reasonings as to why. Okay, let's go. First off is Ayla. Say what you will about the Japanese, they do be horny. Ayla's character has the unfortunate combination of being super one-dimensional while also not having much of a character at all. Her character is that she's a cave woman, also super horny. That's it. There are some things that are good that come from her being a horny cave woman, like her combat techs. All of them are unique and fun to pull off in battle, like her literally throwing your other companions at the enemy, which is undeniably pretty sick. I just don't enjoy the whole, me dumb, me know nothing, me want to fuck man with spiky red hair because that means main character in Japan. Plus, can you blame me for not enjoying her? If you give me the choice between sexy 8-bit Ooga Booga cave lady or a chivalrous frog and a robot that gets the brakes beaten off it, I'm choosing those lovable gooners any day of the week. Next up is Merle. Again, her personality is just being horny for Chrono and being a princess. At least with Merle, we see more of her throughout the story, and she's essentially the damsel in distress to rescue at the beginning of the game, so there's something at least. I just never enjoyed her character or her personality. She just feels like a bratty princess. Big whoop. Her combat is a support magic user, which is fine, just not my style of character I want to play in a game like this. Plus, I just don't give a fuck about the castle drama when there's an evil kidney stone about to destroy the universe as we know it. I like the court scene that comes from her story though, a cool inclusion that can change based on decisions you make, some of which you don't even know you're making. Next is Luca. Her entire personality is... actually... She's the nerdy best friend archetype who definitely doesn't have a crush on the main character. Why would you even say that, you fucking stinky head? At first I really didn't care much for her just because I've seen this character so many goddamn times. But she does have a pretty cool quest that explains why she is so neurodivergent, and it has some emotional weight. Plus her character is a blast to use in combat, and she can absolutely nuke enemies. And she keeps that Thule on her. But don't get it twisted, she do be a fucking nerd who caused all this mayhem in the first place, in need of a good wedgie and a stuffing in a locker. Next up is Robo. Again, super one-dimensional, but if your one dimension is the fucking future, we can work with that. I just love Robo's design and the moves he uses. He's such a funny, unique character that you don't see often. His side quest is one hell of a buttfucker, but it is funny to see him absolutely get smacked the fuck down by his ops, so there's that. Robo fills a unique role in that he is mainly physical based, but has some magic which can be used for support, so he fits into a playstyle that I quite enjoy. Next is Magus. I won't go into too much detail since I already talked about how I enjoyed his build up as a villain, but his companion story is just as good. You get to go through the evil empire he built and demolish it, which is fun to do, and he feels like a busted companion. His magic abilities are crazy and he might be the strongest character. I hate when a game builds up a villain as being powerful, and then you acquire them on your team and they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. That is not the case for Magus. He's genuinely as powerful as he was during the boss fight, and I enjoy his brooding personality that comes with it. Finally, my favorite, Frog. Frog's character is so good. I love his design. I'm a fan of the absolute freakazoids, the dinguses, the weirdos. The whole knight personality is funny and clashes with his goofy frog look in a way that's super memorable. He's a good balance of physical and magic, and his frog bounce move might be my favorite move in the game. His backstory is tragic and engaging and ties so heavily to the plot to a point in which he feels mandatory. His hatred of Magus leads to a great climax where he's given the choice to put his past behind him or finally get revenge on this rat bastard. Also, his involvement with the legendary sword Masamune, I think, makes Frog feel like the companion. He feels like the mascot of this game in the best way possible, and he is without a doubt my favorite. I mean, he's a fucking frog, what do you want me to say? We have officially reached the end of Chrono Trigger. This is the part where I give my highly anticipated rating. Drumroll please. I'm gonna give Chrono Trigger a solid A. 4.0 baby, valedictorian of its class. In my opinion, it's not quite in the S tier because while being done beautifully, it still feels a little too basic for my personal taste. But let's not get it wrong. It's not trying to be anything besides a great and simple, yet fantastic short RPG. That's fine. We are comparing the best of the best RPGs here. So to be so simple, yet so iconic and widely beloved, is no accident. Let me use this as an example. If you came up to me and said, I think Dragon Ball Z is the greatest show of all time, I wouldn't argue with you. I would definitely disagree with you, but I could totally see someone loving the show that much. That's how I feel about this game. Not my personal favorite, but I completely understand why so many love this game and why IGN ranked it number 1.
Nombre 2.
Final Fantasy VI, another icon in the genre of JRPGs. Final Fantasy VI is an RPG released by Square in 1994 for the SNES. Also, important to note, this is the first time I've ever played this game. Never even touched Final Fantasy VI until I arrived at it for this video. And that's what it's all about, baby. Playing the classics that I never got around to. For full transparency, I will admit, I never tried this game because I always thought it looked just okay. Older JRPGs were never my thing, and the ones I did like were the odd ducks of the genre. I always viewed the early Final Fantasies the same way that I view the band The Eagles. Undeniably classic, but absolutely mid. However, I put all my completely unfair and unwarranted biases aside and played this game with fresh eyes. There are many versions of Final Fantasy VI, but for this video I chose to play the Pixel Remaster Edition for the Nintendo Switch. I chose the Pixel Remaster because I wanted to represent the way that most people might play this game in today's age, and the Switch seemed like an obvious choice. There are slight differences, mainly including quality of life features and a slightly brighter color tone, but from my research I concluded that there are no meaningful nor massive differences between the Pixel Remaster and the original. So I went with the Pixel Remaster, which is easier to play on modern hardware. The big difference that I saw was that the Pixel Remaster has a new and improved soundtrack, which is a remastered version of the original, and people seem to genuinely love it as much, if not more, than the original. And I think that's great. But Papa don't play that way. So I slapped that classic filter on soundtrack preferences and transported myself to 1994, the year of the dog. Now that all that bullshit is out of the way, let's get started. The story of Final Fantasy VI is without a doubt its best attribute. Considering the time where there were so many laid-back and fun adventure stories, to have a game that is so bleak and so grand is a nice departure. I am a man of high society and civilized tastes. I swirl my wine when I drink it, and I love a good nihilistic story, or any story really with mature themes. This game does not shy away from the ugly parts of war and depravity, whether that's an entire castle being massacred, a character's family being killed in front of them, or a character attempting to unalive themselves because of how bleak their situation is. This game is dark, and it embraces that and shows off how truly hopeless one can be. But on the flip side, this game has many high notes of brevity and hope. There are uplifting stories of saving one another from these hopeless situations and characters serving as one another's reasons for existing. This game balances both of those tones expertly. Except for the part where a character says his final goodbyes to his dead wife and children, and then the next scene acts like fucking Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson. Hey, Morgan, I like men. Except for the part where a character says his final goodbyes to his dead wife and children, and in the next scene acts like fucking Homer Simpson, but we don't need to talk about that. I know from my description this game sounds super serious and full of itself, but that is genuinely not the case. Final Fantasy VI does a good job of maintaining a serious atmosphere while having some of the silliest moments I think I've seen in an RPG. A reoccurring boss is a talking squid. Okay. Squished in between military domination of an entire continent and a world apocalypse is a goofy fucking cephalopod who's trying to ruin an opera. Yet, these scenes never feel like it's detracting from the story, but rather providing a brief period of respite in between all the madness. We also can't talk about the story without talking about Kefka. Kefka is without a doubt one of the best villains I've ever seen in a video game. Remember in Chrono Trigger where I described my frustration with building up a great villain and then beating them midway through and losing all momentum? Well, this game does the exact opposite of that. I remember hearing about how iconic Kefka was, and during the first quarter to first half of the game, I didn't get it. I just saw him as like some slapstick psychopath. Yet we see him get increasingly unhinged in his actions until the midway point where it happens. The villain wins. He gives the planet a good nut tapping. He gives Mother Nature a titty twister. One of my favorite parts about the twist is we see firsthand the destruction Kefka causes by winning. He doesn't simply win and announce himself king, he destroys the entire fucking world. The storytelling power of going from a lush continent that we can explore for the first half to the bleak, monotonous, apocalyptic look of the second half feels so jarring that you truly feel the weight of Kefka's power. He doesn't feel like a random clown man, he feels like an earth-shattering threat that needs to be stopped for the good of the world. I mean, Jesus, his impact on the world is so depressing that one of our main characters tries to unalive themselves. Absolutely fucking bonkers that this story plot occurred in a JRPG in the 90s. There are such great stakes built, and these stakes ride the coattails of the villain Kefka. I will say despite all this, the final fight is cool cinematically, but Kefka is easy to beat, which is a slight complaint, but the character is written so well that defeating him feels just as good. I also appreciate the way that character stories are dispersed throughout the entire game. Each story seems to fit perfectly within the story, and despite being quote-unquote side quests, they feel so intricately woven into the story that they don't feel like asides at all. Finally, I love the ending. Seeing each character escape while rolling credits feels like a fun and smart way to put the finishing touches on such a great story and great characters. The presentation of this game is great. I'm a huge fan of this darker art style. While I enjoy the cozier pixel feel of many 16-bit games on the Super Nintendo like Chrono Trigger, the detailed look of enemies gives such a gritty feeling to this game, and it makes the bosses seem even more memorable. The combination of beautiful environmental backgrounds mixed with dilapidated towns gives each area a unique vibe. I love the mix of medieval undertones with futuristic machinery. It makes the setting feel so distinct and unlike any other game I have ever played. The music, like most Final Fantasy games, is top-notch. While I may not have been bouncing my head to every theme in the game, it all felt like it fit the mood in a perfect way. The score felt appropriately massive in scale, and every theme seemed grandiose, like one piece of a larger epic. The overworld exploration is also a high point for this game. Usually, map exploration is such a chore that's not even worth mentioning, but in this game, flying your Zeppelin across an expansive continent adds to the immersive adventure present in Final Fantasy VI. When I was writing this, knuckle deep in nostril, I would often find myself at a loss to describe some of the beauty evoked with cutscenes, such as the opera performance, or the Kefka-driven universe butt-fucking. 30 years later, these scenes still hold up and feel just as impactful. The grading of these scenes are beautiful and have easily stood the test of time. Despite all these tricks I've been doing on it for Final Fantasy VI, I do have some complaints. For one, as intricately designed as the enemies are, it is slightly jarring to have these detailed depictions of monsters and ghouls next to approximately 30 pixels worth of our characters. This part always felt off-kilter, but I'm not entirely sure how to alleviate this. I don't think I'd want more detailed character sprites, nor would I want less detailed enemy sprites. I just figured I had to mention it because it is a bit uncanny. Worse yet, I have always hated random encounters. They are the bane of my existence. I rue the day that the game designer, Dorito dust on belly, mustard in chin beard, decided to implement random encounters in RPGs. If you're the type of person who enjoys random encounters, I ask but one thing: love yourself. The Pixel Remaster fixes this by giving you the option to turn random encounters on and off, but still, you cannot go the entire game with having them off, as you miss out on some of the cool and unique enemies from area to area. However, once you've experienced those enemies, I would highly implore you to turn that shit off ASAP. And if you played the original with all random encounters intact, Godspeed, soldier. Fuck random encounters. The character progression is meh. There really is not much to say. You fight enemies, you level up, etc, etc. The one wrench in this typical formula is the inclusion of assigning espers, which can increase specific attributes to the character the esper is assigned to, and teaches a specific magic move. In theory, I like the idea of toying with the progression system. But with this, there come some problems. One, it's not fun to manually swap out the espers from one character to another. It's a pain in my nuts. 2, tying magic to espers makes it so that there are some that are essential and some that you will never fucking touch. Because, let it be known, magic is completely busted. There are arguably 3 to 4 characters that should rarely use magic. The rest of your crew should be spamming Ultima like their lives depended on it. Magic is just way too OP, and it can completely throw off the level curve. There was one section in a tunnel, where for the life of me, I could not get past this motorcycled bastard. I was grinding levels like no tomorrow, but I kept getting my ass wiped by these motherfuckers. Finally, I loaded an earlier save and grinded an esper that taught Firaga to lock, and proceeded to smear my ball sweat all over the same boss that took my lunch money. Epic. A cool 2 hours just to discover magic is busted. Nice. Equipment also feels completely unspectacular. Armor is truly just stat boosting run-of-the-mill equipment. Weapons can be interesting depending on which you have, but for the most part, weapons are also just your regular scale and power. Towards the end, there are some final weapons that feel like a fun endgame boost in power, and are appropriately strong to use, especially the ones you find on the Kefka ship, or the gear you get from beating the elemental dragons. But for most of the game, it's very easy to forget what weapon you even have equipped. Accessories are the main way of diversifying and building a character, but even those are limited. There are some accessories which can irrevocably change the feel and playstyle of an entire character, and these are extremely fun to equip, but it's usually on a per character basis. For example, the accessory that lets Setzer change from rolling them 7s to chucking coins is an example of an accessory like that. Some accessories can change a character's special, like allowing Lock Steel to do damage. Some can offer massive boosts in magic power, like the Tome that lets you use magic twice in one turn, and some can even allow characters to dual wield. These can offer variety in character builds, and it feels like there are many viable pieces of equipment that a character can equip. Unfortunately, this is the only true way of building a unique character, and even then, there definitely are accessories that are better used on some characters rather than others. Now onto combat. Combat is also basic. However, I will say that I felt properly challenged in some of the fights in this game. After perusing the interwebs, I realized that this may have been because I forgot I turned off random encounters and was brutally underleveled. Because if I did not know any better, according to the online discourse, apparently Final Fantasy VI is Baby's first RPG, and I was Baby. There were some boss fights that definitely took pieces of sanity away from my psyche, looking at you, child predator at the top of Cultist Tower. Magic Master, more like fucking ass blaster because he demolished me multiple times. Bosses are designed in smart ways that combine interesting mechanics required to beat them, along with the good old-fashioned raw damage and health to make for entertaining boss battles. Random encounters can also be varied, with some gimmick you have to figure out to beat different enemy types, and solving these little puzzles can be entertaining. However, some encounters are outright bullshit. I remember there was an enemy that beat the shit out of me, took my fruit snacks from my lunchbox, and sent me back to my most recent save. I was fucking flabbergasted as to how to beat the enemy, as it pretty much one-shotted my entire team. When I looked it up online, my answer was pretty much, yeah, if you encounter this thing, you're fucked. So I pretty much had a 1 in 16 chance of getting my shit licked. Really cool! The wash rinse of it all when it comes to combat can wear down on you in the roughly 40 hours it takes to beat this game, especially when combat revolves around you either using magic, a special option which changes on a per character basis, a regular attack, or the usage of an item. Spoiler alert, you should be using magic just about every time. There are some characters like Shadow or Setzer who have other options at their disposal which are actually more effective than magic, but for just about every other character, magic is always the best option. So the game becomes more of a balancing act with MP, or mana as you may know it, because every character should be using magic. There are also special Esper moves, which serve as an extremely powerful magic move that uses a bunch of MP, and these moves provide some of my favorite animations in the game. You can only use them a limited number of times, but when you're running low on options or need a large boost of damage quickly, they're quite effective. Also, speaking of large damage, the numbers you get up to is fucking insane. We're talking 9,999 damage a hit, which honestly becomes a little goofy in my opinion. But if your monkey neuron activates at the sight of large damage numbers, then this is the system for you. Again, combat is pretty simple, but the gimmicks that the game throws at you can provide enough of a switch up so that it never feels completely stale. The total cast of characters in this game is one of the best I've seen. That's an impressive feat when the game boasts a roster of 14 characters. Now obviously the quality of character vastly differs, but as a whole, this is a great lineup. I've already gushed about Kefka, so there's no need to retread waters. So since there are so many companions, let's jump right into them, going from least favorite to favorite. Last is Gogo. Gogo feels like an inside joke that I'm not in on. What the fuck is he doing here? Why is he even recruitable? I understand he's the quote-unquote secret companion, but unfortunately, the only secret is that he fucking stinks. Next up is Gao. Gao, I'll call him Gao. I know you might be saying, with the right rage, he can curb stomp any enemy. But don't care, didn't ask, plus you're white, plus L, plus ratio. He's so boring as a character. I said it with Ayla and I'll fucking say it again. I don't enjoy the archetype of a character that acts like a wild animal. But this time, instead of a sexy cave woman, we get a feral child. Umago is a fun character because he's a goddamn yeti and you can't control him. Sick. My favorite characters are the ones you can't control. Next. Mog is fine. Mog is the mascot of this game and I just hate mascots in media. I'm not talking about characters like Frog and Chrono Trigger. I mean more like Hey Hey and Moana, where the entire character is, oh look, he's just a silly little guy in a mean big world. Boo. I could microwave this little freak and feel absolutely nothing. He also has that lame special type where you have to collect them. Oh my god, I'm gonna sneeze, hold on. I'm gonna pick my fucking nose, bro. He also has that lame special type where you have to collect them. On top of that, the dances you collect fucking suck. He's decent with the spear though. Sabin is a fan favorite, and I can kind of understand why. I mean, he's a meathead who can suplex a fucking train. That rocks. I just find his story a bit bland, and I don't think I enjoy the whole punching monsters with your bare fists in the face as appealing as everyone else does. His specials are beautifully animated though, and I love his character in combat. It's just the outside part that's lacking. The only good thing he has going for him isn't even his own arc, it's his brother's. Next is Realm and Strago. I'm going to talk about them together since they feel like a necessary pair. I really like Realm and Strago's relationship in this game. It adds a wholesome story in the midst of all the death and destruction. We feel the weight of Strago trying to protect his quote-unquote child because we have seen the dangers of the outside world. We can also empathize with Realm, the little tyke who just wants to explore the world. I just don't enjoy Realm in combat. She feels like a support character and I could never get the sketch option to actually work and be worth the turn it takes. Strago is an absolute beast of a fucking wizard. He's so strong in combat and is one of the best magic users, but he also has one of those annoying specials that requires collecting different moves from different enemies. Why are there so goddamn many of these? His character is entertaining with the whole crazy old man personality, but I think it doesn't go far enough with that. His design is great and he has some genuinely funny moments, like the fact that he just straight up joins a cult when he thinks Realm dies. That shit's pretty funny. Outside of that, he's played pretty straight and serves as the wholesome old man doing his best to raise a child in unfortunate circumstances, which is a good character perspective to have in a setting like this. Fuck, there's so many characters. Locke is pretty good. He's just kind of your typical debonair rogue, which is just meh in my opinion. He does have quite a lot of involvement in the plot, and I really like the sprite they gave him in-game. In fact, the sprite's so good that for the longest time I thought he was the main character. In combat, he is just a little too weak physically and a little too weak magically, that he finds himself in a bit of a pickle because there's not much use for him. The steal function is nice, but it requires a bit of game knowledge to pull off, and it also requires you to forego your turn, which is a lot to ask for a character that already struggles to keep up. His love story with Celeste does add a little more depth, but in that couple, he's definitely the weak link. I hate that I love Shadow so much. I mean this with all the love in the world, but he is literally just ninja.
I want to be ninja.
I mean, he's an edgy ninja with a doge. He was created in a laboratory to appeal to the inner boy in me. Pause. He does have a really cool special that allows him to throw shurikens. Epic. And use scrolls that allow him to fucking surfs up on the enemies. This makes him stand out because he is one of the characters that is not spamming magic constantly, and his damage output is on par with magic users. His background is your typical lone wolf archetype, so not much there, but I just love his design so much that it makes up for no story, besides
Chop, 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 chow down.
Terra is great. I thought Terra was going to be the character that Celeste turned out to be, but I still enjoy her regardless. She is a bit lacking in personality, but her story provides important background information on espers, and what the fuck they are, so she feels important to the plot. She is also the catalyst of the entire plotline, so she is kind of the main character, but not really. Her Esper transformation is the best special in the game, and she can absolutely obliterate all enemies, including the final boss. I also love the story of her parents, and overall she's just a great character. Cyan is a personal favorite of mine. If he wasn't so goddamn useless in battle, he might be my absolute favorite. He has the most tragic background of any character, and the emotional beats and payoffs that stem from his story are some of the best in the game. Whether it's the entire Phantom Train section, or us finding out that he's been pretending to be a young woman's boyfriend because he's so lonely. Jesus. My Christ. It's so pathetic, it's depressing. I'm not even a big fan of the "doy, I'm just a stupid knight, doy" personality he has, but his story is just so beautiful that I can look past that. Next is Setzer, who might be my most biased pick. I just love that gay lord stereotype. I don't mean gay lord the way that like a 5th grader might use it in a Halo lobby, but rather like an actual gay lord. Peasant. His special is amazing. You can either hit the slots or make it rain on some fucking piss ants. The fixed dice also is my favorite weapon in the game, where you can toss some bones and hit enemies with multiple rows of ridiculous numbers. He's just an outright horny, gambling man. He's just like me. On a serious note, his background of why he has such a hard-on for a ship is endearing and sad in a very muted way. The way he describes his former love interest and partner is beautiful and wait, are they love interests? Nah, he's gay as fuck. The way he describes his former partner is beautiful and fleshes out his character in a way I did not expect. Plus, I love his sprite. Next is Edgar, who keeps that motherfucking bang on him, always strapped with a tool, whether he's shooting crossbows or straight up chainsawing a monster to death. I fucking love him in combat. He's very flexible and can focus on using support magic, being a healer, using his tools, being a dragooner, or nuking enemies with Ultima. He can do it all and can slot into any role you need in the party. His story is also great. We don't usually see kings fight in battle in games like this, so it's refreshing to see a king of an entire kingdom who can throw down when necessary. It adds to the depth of his character, along with the fact that he saved his brother Sabin from having to take responsibility of the family legacy. The coin toss scene is one of my favorites in the game. Edgar also is chock full of personality, and I enjoy every interaction he has with other characters. Finally, my favorite, Celeste. Celeste is so multifaceted as a character. She has the highest highs and the lowest lows. Her scene at the opera is one of the most iconic in gaming, and her relationship to Locke is a bright flame in the dark undertones of this story. She is full of life and vigor, and she serves as the heart and soul of the entire story. I mean, there would be no second half to this game if it wasn't for her going town to town to get the old gang back together. Her transition from evil empire to our lovable band of rebels feels natural, and the way in which she is willing to do anything to help our crew is admirable. She is great in combat and is one of the best magic users in the entire game. Her special is kind of useless, but she's so strong that she doesn't really need a better one. She is without a doubt the best written character, and one that I won't soon forget. Holy fuck, that was a lot. I apologize. But we made it. We are at the final conclusion of Final Fantasy VI. So, what am I going to rate it? Coming into this game, I did not expect a lot. I figured it would feel old and dated, and janky beyond comparison. Never have I been more surprised by the product I got. I absolutely love this game, and it felt like time flew by whenever I played this. I'm gonna give Final Fantasy VI an A+. Like I said, not a huge JRPG fan, but this game held my hand, took me underneath the bleachers and said, I'm gonna turn this boy into a man. I love this game, and this will definitely not be the one and only time I play it. Obviously, it's a little dated and has some annoying quirks, along with combat that can be quite repetitive at times. But if you can look past all of this, you will find a great RPG.
Nummer 3.
I swear, every time I open up Baldur's Gate, I get fucking cold-cocked by that soundtrack. Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Amn. Baldur's Gate 2 is a computer role-playing game developed by BioWare in the year 2000. For the first time on this list, I can say this will not be the first time I have played this game fully through. I'll get my biases out of the way up front and say, I love Shadows of Amn. I have loved this game ever since I first picked it up my sophomore year of college, and my positive feelings for it have only grown stronger since then. Like a moth to flame, like an autistic child to trains, I am drawn to the world of Baldur's Gate. I'm not even a huge fan of D&D like that, but this game made me more interested in D&D lore and RPGs that take inspiration from tabletop games. Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Amn forever changed my tastes, and I am grateful for that. So strap in and get ready for me to glaze the absolute fucking shit out of this game because I have a lot to say. The version I played is the Enhanced Edition, which is the widely available version that most people will probably be familiar with. The differences between the Enhanced Edition and the regular version are mainly quality of life updates, graphical updates, and some additional content that was added later on. All of the content added is completely optional, and I will say I personally ignored every single bit of it. It always feels weird with remasters when the original content is altered or added onto, especially when done by a developer who did not develop the original game. Luckily, Beamdog, the company in charge of the Enhanced Edition port, made all of the content they developed and added in optional side content, which is actually quite easy to dismiss. Which is exactly what I fucking did. I will also clarify that IGN lists Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn as their pick, but I also played the expansion pack Throne of Ball, which is technically separate. Throne of Ball just feels like the natural conclusion to the original Baldur's Gate story, so I figured I may as well play it, and talk about them as a total package. Now that that intro hubbubaloo is out of the way, let's get started with the story. The story picks up shortly after the end of the first game, where you found out you were Baalspawn, the offspring of the god of murder Baal. In Baldur's Gate 2, your player-created character wakes up in a prison cell, unfamiliar with their captor or their surroundings. I always loved the way that Baldur's Gate 2 just jumps ass first into the story. No explanation how we got there, no recap on events leading up to our capture, but rather starting us cold turkey in a foreign environment where we, the player, are just as clueless as the avatar we are controlling. The opening dungeon is a perfect way to set the tone for our main antagonist Irenicus, and does a great job building him up to be a true son of a bitch. As you weave your way through this prison, slowly uncovering the horrors that Irenicus is capable of, you finally escape, only for your adopted sister, Eowyn, to be promptly abducted by a powerful wizard organization in the city of Amn, along with Irenicus. That's a long sentence. And so starts the journey to rescue Eowyn. I love the way the game gives you a loose goal of finding Eowyn and sets you out into the city of Amn to figure it out on your own. By explaining to the character that the rescue mission for Eowyn requires 20 grand in total, it gives our group a reason to go and explore the open world and do side quests. So often in RPGs, there is a main plot that is life or death for the entire world, so going on little side quests feels silly or like it's detracting from the stakes of the main plot. By giving the characters a reason to explore, you are allowed to do these side quests because of the explicit goal to raise money to save Eowyn. There's a freedom in Baldur's Gate 2 that is unlike many RPGs, and you genuinely feel like you're allowed to do any quest you want in any order. Also, the way quests are relayed to you feels so natural. I love that you don't just go to an NPC who gives you a quest and that's that. Many quests are started because you overhear citizens talking or you happen to stumble across a companion in need of assistance. It feels so fluid that you forget about the ever-growing list of quests you still need to complete. Also, the story provides as an excuse to introduce the player to a plethora of different environments in D&D lore, some of which are super interesting. You get to discover cultures like that of the Drow in the Underdark. You get a taste of the Saguagin, a fish city, and the fish people that inhabit it. And you learn about many deep-cut races of D&D, like the Githyanki during the Mind Flayer colony section. All of these different story beats are filled with interesting bits of information on different inhabitants of the world of Baldur's Gate. And it fleshes out the universe that your character exists within. And Irenicus. What can I say about Irenicus that hasn't been said a million times by a million different video essays? He's an intimidating villain who feels like an equal to your character's power, and like he surpasses you in intelligence. He is always outthinking and outmaneuvering you, and throughout the story he plays you like a fucking fiddle. All of this while having phenomenal voice acting and a memorable character design. His backstory is tragic, and it feels like everything he does is with a purpose, and to further his goal of acquiring absolute power to seek revenge. He's definitely deserving of the title as one of the best villains in all of gaming. This game also does a phenomenal job of creating memorable minor villains that serve as a great appetizer to the feast that is Irenicus, and his challenging and great final boss fight. I'm talking about characters like Bodhi, who are a thorn in your side the entire game, or Furkrag, whose final fight is one of the most memorable sections in the game. This game knows how to build a character you love to hate, and beating each of these characters is such a dopamine hit that you just have to experience. All of this being said, I do have a slight complaint. The story relies too much on us caring about Imoen as a character. I never liked her in the original Baldur's Gate, and I don't have a strong attachment to her as a character that makes me want to rescue her as soon as possible. It is kind of funny to acquire the 20k to rescue her and be like, I could save my stepsister, who's being tormented and probably scarred for life currently. Or, I could drop a bag on some sick fucking drip and a crossbow. The art style and direction of this game can be highly polarizing. I for one enjoy the 2.5D aesthetic that serves as a mix of 3D sprites and 2D environments, but I can also understand people who think that it looks like dog shit. It is definitely aged in a very specific way and can either result in a look you despise or absolutely adore. I for one find it oddly cozy, with backdrops being absolutely beautiful and full of life. God, I'm sweating like a goddamn pig in here. The odd 3D sprites also feel so nostalgic for that Infinity Engine era of CRPGs that I've come to love, but as I said, I would get it if it's cat piss to your eyes. Character sprites can also be quite bad, with their sprites looking absolutely nothing like their character portrait. Some are okay, like Viconia or Jaheira, and some are just awful, like how the fact that there's no hair options, yet our clearly insane bald friend Minsk is sprouting a head full of Geopet hair. But for every awful rendition of character sprites in this game, there's an equal amount of memorable and amazing enemy sprites. The art style is perfect for creating ethereal monster sprites that look unnatural and creepy because of the 2D environments it exists within. The Slayer monster you can transform into especially stands out to me. Enemy models like the Beholders or the Mind Flayers or even giants you fight look so memorable. Dragons are also allowed to be gigantic because there are no insane polygon surrender, rather just a fat fucking dragon model whose size you can feel. Enemy sprites are terrific and perfectly capture the wide variety of memorable D&D monsters that you've grown to love. The music is okay. Some of the themes are rightly iconic, like that goddamn main theme. However, the rest of the music does not particularly stand out to me, but it does a good job of capturing the right mood. Fight scores sound intense and epic, and the music in the Underdark feels creepy. Again, I wouldn't say the soundtrack is bad, just not as memorable outside of a few key tracks. The layout is also just okay, definitely a product of its time. It's not super clunky, but it also doesn't feel like the best layout. The Enhanced Edition definitely fixes some of the problems, like providing a quick bar that shows you items on the ground, but there is a lot left to be desired. The way the game delivers information is especially brutal. I don't need a million failed quest notifications or a million markers showing quest locations, but a quest log that actually fucking tells you the quests you have would be nice. Let's talk about character creation and progression. Let me start off with some lib shit and say, it's kinda cool that there's an option for a native portrait that's not fucking Chief Wahoo. This may seem like a minor point, but I can count on my 2 balls the number of games that have character portraits that are native, and being native myself, little things like this are cool. There are many portraits to choose from, and from there you can pick your race and class. I chose a human ranger. Rangers always appeal to me because I feel like if I existed in the D&D universe, the only way I could reasonably survive is if I had a fucking piece on me. And what is a crossbow, if not a medieval Glock? I would be an outright menace with a crossbow.
Oh, there it is. He had a crossbow on him. Look at that. Oh my God.
Baldur's Gate 2 has all the classes from D&D, with a small selection of subclasses for each class. The choices for character creation are vast, and you can easily spend hours deciding on a character that you want to take through this massive endeavor of a game. All your favorite D&D races are also available to play, although there are some weird racial restrictions. I understand that races that aren't human get unique bonuses, so you have to nerf them somewhat, but I feel like greatly limiting the classes they can play is a bit too far. Why can't you play as a gnome paladin? I never got that. I understand that in order to make humans appealing, you have to give them something other races don't have, but I feel like the dual class option that is specific to humans does just that. Dual classing allows you to level up 2 classes, one after the other, to make a very strong mixture of the 2 classes, and it feels like an already strong benefit to have as a human. Oh, he's such a cutie. Sorry, my cat just yawned really cute. Dual classing allows you to level up 2 classes, one after the other, to make a very strong mixture of the 2 classes, and it feels like an already strong benefit to have as a human. I also dislike how only certain races can go through with romances in the game. Why can't I allow my dwarf to get some fucking poontang? Restrictions like these dissuade playing as weird races, and I dislike that Baldur's Gate 2 did this. Also, the fact that you can't play as a goblin is a fucking crime. Where is my RPG where I can choose a goblin as a race? It's actually, if you think about it, so fucked up. That being said, there are still many classes to choose from, with the inclusion of multi-classing adding even more possibilities. As far as creating characters themselves, fucking forget about it. You choose your fantasy race, which chooses the sprite, and you can then change their color tone and color of clothes. That's it. The addition of strongholds, which are specific buildings or areas tailored to your class, adds even more depth to your role-playing and makes you feel like the class you chose. You can be a ranger who owns a cabin in the woods, a fighter who owns his own castle, a mage with his own planar sphere, and many more. My personal favorite is the bard who is in charge of a theater and has to make decisions about an upcoming play. These add so much to the role-playing of your class, and I love when RPGs include things like this, which makes your playthroughs feel more personalized. Progression feels great, with each level up feeling like a nice boost in power. Whether you're a fighter gaining Thaco or a caster being able to learn higher level spells, the balance feels appropriate. Throne of Ball does a good job of introducing high level abilities right when classes like the fighter start getting stale, opening up the possibilities of your character at those higher levels. The loot present is also top notch, with some of the most iconic equipment in RPGs being present here. You have the Paladin exclusive Great Sword Karsamir that dispels magic on hit, the amazing Firetooth Crossbow which fires its own special ammo, Crom Fair, the legendary hammer that boosts the user's strength, the Robe of Vecna making spellcasting instantaneous. All these items and many more allow builds to come together and feel like truly legendary loot items. I also love how these items provide more than just straight damage increase or higher defense. Most items provide a unique ability that you can use when you have it equipped, or some other boost that extends beyond just a raw number increase. This makes all items feel unique and important, and it provides legitimate choices for what items you want to use since each does something different. This makes the progression system never feel stagnant because you're always chasing that next piece of equipment or that next level up so you can use new abilities. It really is addicting. Now for combat, the game's biggest strength and weakness. You better lube them fingers up because you will be finger blasting that spacebar, pausing and unpausing to keep up with the speed of battle. It's gonna feel like fucking high school prom with all the fingering going on. Combat is undeniably janky. It's real time with pause, so if you want the best shot at tracking what's happening, you will be forced to constantly pause combat encounters, which effectively turns it into a turn-based game. Combat is quick, completely unintuitive, and there's no helpful tutorials or information explaining the rule set of AD&D 2nd edition, which Baldurs Gate 2 is based off of. It's ugly, brutal, and gets absolutely no bitches. Area of effect spells have no indication of what they will hit, so you better cast and pray you don't wipe your team, buddy. Before any fight worth its salt, you will spend 10 minutes pre-buffing, so you better learn which spells you need to always have prepared and ready to cast before big bosses. If you forget to cast a single protection, like, I don't know, protection from fear and fight a dragon, there's a large chance you will wipe. There's almost no feedback, and many times all that you'll know is that your weapon attacks are doing nothing, with no explanation as to why. You better slide on that headband and get to fucking Nancy Druin so you can figure out why you're doing absolutely no damage, because this game sure as fuck won't tell you. If you want any shot at understanding and mastering combat, you better get ready to watch lots of YouTube videos or get ready for loads of trial and error. However, once you do get the hang of combat, it is one of the best feeling systems I have ever played. This combat system feels so rewarding to get the hang of, and pulling off maneuvers or proper counters makes you feel on top of the world. Perfectly timing a magic dispelling spell on a mage with one of your characters hitting that same enemy with a critical hit for massive damage is one of the best feelings in gaming. Getting Yon to cast a mislead and backstabbing an enemy for 50 damage is unparalleled. Kiting an enemy into a trap you set before battle feels sexy. This game makes you feel like an absolute Giga Chad in combat, and that's a spectacular feeling. Baldurs Gate 2 is also one of the few games where I recommend you take a character or two that does nothing but auto attack. Normally, characters like that can be kind of boring, but when you have 6 characters to micromanage, having 1 or 2 you can leave to do their own thing is a godsend. My character was an archer who did disgusting damage without requiring much babysitting, which is really nice when I had to manage 4 magic users in my party. You also have all the abilities stemming from your equipment you can make use of, so there never feels like any moment where a character should be doing nothing. It makes combat fly by, and it allows all fights to have a high amount of intensity. This game also has great endgame fights with enemies like dragons and liches feeling like puzzles. Figuring out what protections they have set up and how to strip them of said protections feels like a fun game of cat and mouse, where you're in a delicate balancing act of maintaining your own defenses while tearing down your enemies. These can lead to fun matchups that require focus and proper timing, and nailing that timing leads to such a fulfilling payoff that makes combat quite addicting. All of these fights lead to the culmination of facing Irenicus in Hell, which is such a difficult, memorable final boss. Once you get to Throne of Ball, you are essentially in a high-level boss gauntlet with some of the most intense fights I've experienced in gaming, like the fight with Balthazar and the insanely difficult fight against a Melisande. Overall, it is a rewarding combat system that's combined with some of the most well-designed fights I've experienced. I won't lie, It is challenging to learn, and I still haven't fully mastered it to this day, but if you dedicate the time to learn this difficult set of rules, you will not be disappointed. Get ready, because this section is long. The cast of companions in this game is the best cast in any video game. Period. Full stop. No cap. On jaw. The cast is varied and memorable, and includes my favorite companion of all time. They can talk and bicker with one another. They can flirt and fight and fuck and everything in between. They can interact with the world in unique ways that makes the party feel real, not just portraits on a screen, but characters that react to choices you make and the events that unfold. The entire feel of your playthrough can change depending on who you bring with you. Finding pairings with unique dialogues is some of the highlights during repeat playthroughs. Just in this playthrough, I found out Jaheira and Hair-Delise make a great pair with great dialogue, and I'm sure there's many more that I've still yet to discover. But since there are fucking quadrillion companions, let's get right to it. You know the drill, worst to best. Here we go. Last is Animan, your typical knight in shining armor. His class of fighter duel to cleric is disgustingly busted, and he might be the most powerful companion, but I cannot fucking stand him. Next is Valigar, the dread-headed Vin Diesel. He is so fucking boring, dude. An absolute non-character. His personal quest is one of my favorites in the game with the planar sphere, but he just has nothing to his personality. His class is Stalker, which is a ranger who can backstab, which is actually pretty fun, but in a cast of so many eclectic characters, he feels like a wasted spot. Next is Cerned. Cerned is a druid. That's his entire personality. His class of Shapeshifter is cool in concept, but notoriously weak, as he can't wear armor and his werewolf form does not scale. He has some funny banters with companions, so he's not dead last, but he's definitely bottom tier. Sick portrait though. I want to give a quick shout out to Saravok. He comes far too late, but his dialogue is entertaining and his voice acting is great. Cool in concept, just too little too late. Next is Imoen. I said it before, I never really liked her character. She's so bland and whiny, especially in the opening dungeon. You also don't even get her until halfway through the game, and once you do, she's pretty good as a thief duel to mage. I just never liked the whole, oh, I'm Inuin, we should do good things because we're good people and because doing good is good. Next is Nalia, who is literally a carbon copy of Imuin. Just about same stats and same dual class, you just get Nalia way earlier, and she has more personality. Her personal quest leading to the keep is great, and I actually quite enjoy her character. Being the naive rich girl who is confused why the fucking poor broke bitches don't want her help is entertaining to watch. And the way she can hold her own against bullying from the other companions is endearing. She's not bad, I just think there are better companions. Aerie is naive in a good way because there are so many jaded companions that don't react to your awful circumstances that her outlook on the situation can be a breath of fresh air. However, she is a tad too whiny, and all the best conversations that involve her are just her getting mercilessly bullied and made fun of while she complains to you. Aerie definitely needs a firm prescription of Quitcha. Quitcha bitchin'. She does have a really good character arc with her becoming more confident and assertive in throwing a ball, which serves as a nice mirror to her class. The Mage Cleric multi starts off stupid weak, only to end up with a great power spike in throwing a ball, making her one of the best tanking characters due to her access of every spell in the game. Plus, if you romance her, she can poop out a baby. Jaheira is the most normal of the group and fills a necessary role as the straight shooter to all the kooky companions you come across. She's a fighter druid multi, and while being a little weak at first, she eventually becomes one of your strongest companions. She is full of sarcastic wit, which is equally as clever as it is cutting. She's kind of your moral compass and has hilarious dialogue with many characters, and it feels right to have her with you since she has been there from the very beginning. Sassy, bossy, and overcoming grief. Her story is deeply personal, and you feel like you grow a genuine bond together. She's great. Next is Keldorn. Keldorn fills the role of paladin in the party, but he isn't your typical knight archetype like Animan. He's a jaded, grizzled war vet who has given up everything he cares about to fight evil. He isn't a righteous goody two-shoes, he's a bloodthirsty paladin who enjoys the act of killing as long as it's monsters or those he deems evil. His class is filthy. As an inquisitor, he can dispel any magic, but I'm stupid, so I struggled to ever get this to work the way I want. I would try to dispel an enemy mage, but accidentally dispel all of my team's buffs and get squad wiped like a fucking idiot. But if you can get it to work right, this class is broken. I also like his side story where he's getting absolutely cucked and wants to have the man who his wife is cheating on him with put to death. I chose the resolution where you dismiss him from your service to focus on fixing his marriage, which felt like the perfect conclusion to his story after defeating the cult of the Eyeless. Next, the icon of Baldur's Gate, Minsc. Minsc is so iconic, man. He fucking sucks in battle, but man is he iconic. Being a straight ranger class, he constantly dies first and cannot hold his own in battle, but his interjections are hilarious, and he has so much reactivity to the world that he feels like a mandatory companion to have for at least some of the journey. I love him and Boo, and he has many lines of dialogue that would genuinely get a laugh out of me. Plus, you can poke Boo, and he makes a fun little squeaky sound. So, great voice acting and great character. Edwin is hilarious. He might be the most powerful companion in the game, since he's a wizard who gets extra spell slots. I also like having a red wizard for a companion. They're an interesting sect in D&D lore, so it's cool to have one in your party, and I love how unabashedly evil he is. He sees everyone around him as little worms, or simians in his eyes. He's so arrogant that it comes full circle and he actually becomes likable for how much of an outright dickhead he is. He's super strong and his side quest leads to some of the funniest lines of dialogue in the entire game. Great companion and great writing. Yoshimo is fantastic. He is a suave, swashbuckling type who provides exposition about in a way that doesn't feel forced. Fucking tough sentence. His interactions with companions and characters throughout the world is great, and his class is unique. I personally don't like the bounty hunter, as it requires kind of cheesing the game by setting up traps before battle starts and luring monsters into said traps. You need game knowledge, and that feels cheap to me, as you can't put down traps once battle starts, so you either A, just have to know an enemy is coming up, or B, scout ahead by yourself, which takes away from the fun of traveling as a group. I could see the appeal of this class being fun in a solo playthrough, but I didn't particularly love it in my party. Lots of people swear by bounty hunter and adore it, so maybe I'm in the wrong. As far as Yoshimo, I love the twist of him betraying you. It is genuinely surprising the first time and catches you off guard. I love how accepting he is of his fate. I also enjoy the different ways you can roleplay your character's reaction to his betrayal. You can feel sympathetic towards him, angry, or hurt by his actions. He is such an interesting character who I highly recommend at least trying out once, especially if you plan to use Imoen, as you lose Yoshimo right as you acquire Imoen. Mazzy cracks my top 5. She is a prime example of how to do a goody two-shoes character right. Her whole personality isn't just, wow, I love being a good person, don't you? Doing good is so heckin' awesome, dude. She's strong, competent, and constantly trying to prove herself. Her voice acting is top notch, and I like the way the game uses the fact that halflings can't be paladins to her character's benefit. Since she wants to be a paladin but can't, she is just a plain fighter doing her best to do good and help others, and her class reflects this. She's a great archer with fantastic dialogue, especially with good knightly characters like Animen, Keldorn, or Minsk, and I enjoy her character tremendously. Next is Herdelise. I fucking love him, man. He's a bard in the truest sense. Nowadays, we think of bards as smooth-talking, charismatic leaders, but Herdelise is a true bard in that he's a geeky theater kid who deserves to be bullied. He has a poetic way of talking that is super unique in a highly memorable way. He has hilarious interactions with characters like Jahir and Viconia, and I respect the fact that he rizzes up Aerie regardless of if you are in a relationship with her or not. His class is the Blade, which is a bard subclass that was probably the strongest character in my party, who could dish out crazy damage with Cromfair and tank hits. Really fun character to play and entertaining to listen to. Highly recommend. Viconia might be the most complex character in the game. Her background is interesting just by way of her being a drow, an elf from the Underdark, and the insight you get into drow culture from her is very intriguing. She swings hot and cold, especially if you are romancing her, yet there's a reason why, as she's very guarded for a good reason. She's a multifaceted character who can slowly change as the game progresses, and you can actually change her alignment, which is really neat. She's a straight up cleric, and every party needs a cleric, so she's great in combat and outside of combat. Definitely a top 3 character. Number 2 is Korgan. Absolute beast in battle with his Berserker class. He represents grumpy dwarves in the truest sense by being money hungry and only self-interested. His voice acting is top notch, and he has some of the funniest banter in the game. He straight up says he would make Viconia a slave since there are enemies in the Underdark, and complains whenever you do a good action. On the other hand, he's not a man without morals, as he is against spousal abuse and indicates he has some sort of governing law that I think only he understands. He also sexually harasses Mazzy, but it's a give and take. Unironically, those conversations with Mazzy where he's attempting to riz her up, as the kids would say, are some of my favorite conversations in the game. Finally, my favorite companion of all time, the chaotic gremlin himself, Jan. Jan is insane and had me audibly laughing multiple times in the game. His sprite is pimped the fuck out and his banter is downright hilarious. He steals Boo to fuck with Minsk. He teases Keldorn about paladins whose wives cheat on them with flesh golems. He smears gods by telling blasphemous stories about them to piss off religious members of the group. He's psychotic. His class is also super fun, being illusionist/thief, combining magic abilities that lets him turn invisible at will, with thieving abilities that lets him backstab enemies for massive damage. Also, the high level ability that lets him use any item is hilarious, as this scummy little gnome can start crip walking with Garsamir in hand. It's fucking great. All of this leads to one of the most memorable, funny companions, and my favorite companion of all time. Oh my god, that was a lot. I apologize, but this game is a lot. It's packed with details and interactions that are specifically personalized to the companions you bring along, the choices you make, and your character themselves. To accomplish all of this in the year 2000 is no small feat, and because of this game going the extra mile, it still holds up extremely well despite being fairly aged at this point. When it comes to the rating, I struggled a bit. While I love many things about this game, I can understand the downsides. It's a tough, outdated system of D&D that is difficult to learn. THAC0 is confusing, spells themselves can be confusing. Figuring out what protections to use and when can be complicated without a guide. This game demands a lot. But god damn it, if you're willing to put in the required effort to learn the game, there's a genuine masterpiece here that has stood the test of time and will continue to stand the test of time. I'm giving Baldurs Gate 2 an S. Absolutely a masterclass in RPG design. Not a perfect S+, but pretty damn close in my opinion. Man, with each game we keep rising on this scale. It's getting progressively better and better and better. From A to A+ to S.
4番目は、私の失われたすべての少年たちへの叫び、バンガラン。
Pokemon Yellow. Fuck me, dude. Pokemon Yellow is a game for the Nintendo Game Boy released by Game Freak in 1998. A year of many great games. And Pokemon Yellow. Remember in the last section where I said, strap in, there's a lot to talk about? Well, feel free to strap out because there's not much to talk about. Let me get this out of the way and say, I don't hate Pokemon. In fact, I'm an avid enjoyer of Pokemon. I say all of this while a chubby Snorlax plushie stares daggers at me. I love the capitalist little fucking rat known as Pikachu. I grew up on the series and there's a lot to enjoy from the world of Pokemon, and from the Pokemon community. There are fun, interesting ways to play like competitively, or with ROM hacks which can increase the scale and difficulty of each game, or by using self-imposed challenges like in a Nuzlocke. However, I'm breaking down the vanilla base game experience of Pokemon Yellow, and there's not much to break down. Now, I'm not a fucking troglodyte, so I understand the inclusion of Pokemon Yellow in the top 5 by IGN is not specifically based on the merits of the game itself. More rather, it's a representation of the cultural impact Pokemon has had and its impact on the RPG genre. These facts are undeniable, unquestionable. Pokemon did an insane job of making an RPG a worldwide phenomenon. However, we are not breaking down impact of games, we are breaking down the games themselves, alright? So with that out of the way, let's get started. There's only one version of Pokemon Yellow, and that's for the Game Boy, so I don't have to go over that. Obviously, I played this game legally on my classic retro Game Boy that I recorded crystal clear audio and video on, so why would you even ask that? This is not my first time playing this game. I played it when I first discovered what emulators were back in like late elementary school. How far I've come since then. I would never dream of using an emulator nowadays. I wouldn't download a car, would I? Anywho, I don't remember jack shit about playing it then, so I'm essentially playing this with fresh eyes. And yeah, fuck it, let's move on to the breakdown. I'd consider myself a gamer. Yes, gamer, with the hard R. So I was thrilled to play one of the games of all time. Listen, if you're looking for an in-depth breakdown of the plot, story, and motivations of characters in Pokemon, I recommend, real quick, you pop the pacifier out of your mouth and ask mommy to come change your diapers and put you to bed because it's past 9 and you need your EPs to grow big and strong. Upon looking at my notes, I realized I just put the Easter Island head emoji in the story section, so fuck it, I guess. We'll do this one live. In Pokemon Yellow, you start off as a Am I actually fucking doing this? You know the formula. You're a trainer from the middle of bumfuck nowhere and you gain a slave in the form of a starter, and your mom slaps a fiver in your hand, gives you a pat on the ass, and sends you on your way to become the ultimate Japanese Michael Vick. To do this, you must beat 8 gym leaders to gain entry to the Elite Four, where you face a gauntlet of the region's best trainers, and if you accomplish all of this, you become champion. Or, in simpler terms,
I wanna be the very best.
the story is simple and easy to follow. Normally you play as a nameless trainer, but in this game you play as the infamous Ash Ketchum, or, as known by Stephen A. Smith,
Is Ash Ketchum the most overrated Pokemon trainer? I'd say hell yes. That's worse than the Atlanta Braves.
One thing I can give this game credit for is understanding its audience. It definitely takes advantage of the massive success of the animated show and includes and incorporates many story elements from the show itself. I'm talking about the opening acquisition of Pikachu, the larger role of Pikachu as a character, and the inclusion of rivals Jesse and James. In my script, I have the word accent pointing to James, so let me retry this one. And the inclusion of the rivals Jesse And James. It does all of this while maintaining the original storyline from Red and Blue, and it doesn't feel just needlessly tacked on for fan service, except for Jesse, James, and Meowth, but we'll get to that in a sec. As far as villains go, we are dealing with fucking scraps here. Arguably, the main villain is our rival Gary, who is a true son of a bitch. I have never wanted to wipe my sweaty jockstrap on any character in history more than fucking Gary. A mother fricker in its truest sense, sorry for my language. So props to this game for making a hateable asshole of a rival. We had the villainous trio from the anime who definitely feel tacked on to make players drop a fat steamy load in their undergarments and go, I remember them. Finally, there's Giovanni, a Nido King if I've ever seen one, if you know what I'm fucking talking about. He's Italian, definitely in reference to the Italian Mafia, which is so cartoonish that I actually kind of like it.
You come to me with a Pikachu and dough.
He's an okay villain, and I do like the twist of him being the final gym leader. That was always kind of a cool little element to the story that I enjoy. I just think he's a little cookie cutter as far as evil bad guys go. To reiterate, for the umpteenth time, I feel like a fucking jabroni for these flaming hot takes that Pokemon doesn't have deep characters, but what the fuck ever, dude. Finally, I do have to give this game some credit for taking a couple of dark turns in the story, and by couple I mean approximately one. The Tower. It is a genuinely creepy zone with eerie music and an unsettling tone. That, combined with the actual sad backstory of the Marowak at the top, leads to a dark plot point that I respect putting in a game geared towards a younger audience. Presentation is maybe the game's best attribute. I think this game is the personification of doing so much with so little. Since Pokemon Yellow was introduced on the portable Game Boy, a lot had to be scaled back in terms of game design. I'm talking less pixels, less color, and less sounds. Water break. Despite all of this, the simplicity and competence of its design is what has stood the test of time. The soundtrack is so iconic despite being made up of such simple little melodies. Every 8-bit theme, whether it be the battle theme, the intro theme, or the various town themes, all feel distinct and instantly catchy. Achieving this many songs that the average Joe Schmo on the street could recognize is no small feat for an RPG, especially with these technical limitations. And it is definitely one of the reasons that Pokemon as a company is so successful. The sprite work here is also gorgeous. Again, with the limited graphical capabilities of the Game Boy, making so many Pokemon that are still just as iconic today as they were in 1998 is nothing to scoff at, and a lot of that credit is due to the incredibly strong sprite work present from the very beginning. Some outright banger monster designs that 26 years later might be the strongest batch of Pokemon designs of any generation. Undoubtedly, some of that credit is also due to the simplicity of the neurons that flare up as a child when you see Turtle with Gun or Fire Dragon, but regardless, the point stands. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm getting the 7-year-old child in me, pause, fired the fuck up. Fucking tortoise with a bazooka, the flame dragon, and a dinosaur toad? Hell yeah. Also, little changes such as the tone color palette for each city adds a surprising amount of variety and feel to each town. Who would have thought slapping an Instagram filter on each map location would have such an impact, but here we are. Despite all the praise I've been singing about the presentation of Pokemon Yellow, I do have a major complaint. For as cozy as this little game is, it has a surprising amount of tomfuckery when it comes to abrasiveness. Don't know what I mean? Try sending out Pikachu just once. I swear to God, whenever that little Asian Mickey Mouse dies, it commits treason on my fucking eardrums. A non-consensual penetration of the old ear canal. Also, after being poisoned in this game, I have a conspiracy theory. I am convinced Pokemon Yellow is a psyop by the Japanese government looking for a way to legally commit eugenics against all the epileptic children of Japan because Jesus fucking Christ. I almost seized out after getting flashed by the poison screen. I can't even imagine those poor little bastards. God rest their souls. Now we move on to progression. Progression starts off fantastic. When you're at the lower levels, say 1 through 30, leveling up and learning progressively more powerful moves along with gradually getting incrementally stronger feels really fun and rewarding. Evolving your Pokemon comes along with a nice little dopamine hit backed by a great little musical ditty, not pee, and helps deliver the feeling of your team growing in power. Evolution always helps strengthen the bond between you and your Pokemon as you start off with your first stage little guy and grow alongside them and see them mature. Say what you want about Pokemon, but it is one of the most effective games I can think of where you feel so connected to your team and the monsters that you've collected. It nails this concept. However, once you reach that level 35-ish mark, it's kind of stagnant for the rest of the game. By that level, just about every Pokemon you captured has fully evolved and learned all of its best moves, so any real feel of progression halts. This stagnation point also comes much earlier than you might expect and leads to the ending of the game feeling uber repetitive and not as rewarding as the beginning. Also, some of the Pokemon's evolutions are hard locked behind trading. I have always hated this. While I understand the reasoning of providing incentive to turn Pokemon into a social activity that requires playing with friends, that's requiring you to have friends in the first place, which is a tough ask for a gamer. Also, the inner cynic in me has always seen this as more of a milking the cash cow that is Pokemon, rather than a genuine push to get humans to interact with one another. The version-exclusive Pokemon never bothered me, and I think that's a better way of incentivizing trading and buying specific versions of these games that doesn't hardlock specific Pokemon from being used, especially as time goes on and Nintendo no longer supports these older titles. Some Pokemon feel impossible to use, and that sucks. One thing that surprised me about this game is the level curve and balance between player and enemy trainers. For some reason, I always thought this game was horribly balanced and required grinding, but I was pleasantly surprised that that wasn't the case. The curve actually felt quite fair, and I only had to truly quote-unquote grind in select sections. The wild Pokemon you acquire also feel like they're at a fairly appropriate level relative to where you are, which I gotta give this game props for. Except for Squirtle, who is oddly super underleveled, but that's the odd fuck out. Combat is a mixed bag. In some ways, it's genius, and in other ways, it's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Pokemon Yellow really streamlined RPG systems in a way that is highly accessible, yet still fun and rewarding. The idea is simple, and you want to use a move whose typing is strong against the Pokemon you are facing. Think of it like rock, paper, scissors, but with far more options. Simple concept, yet remarkably addicting. Just repeating this loop can lead to hours going by without you realizing what has happened. This combat system is one that I think even my mother, who has not played a video game since fucking Mario for the NES, could understand. It's easy to learn, fun to master, and in combination with the collection aspect of Pokemon, leads to a really fun loop. But that's just the lies Big Nintendo has been selling you. That's the optimist's outlook on Pokemon, but I, a tried and true gamer, emphasis on the gay, knows the truth. Combat is as slow as my wheelchair-bound great-grandmother getting out of a Honda Civic. Fucking molasses slow. In the first couple hours of the game, you're high on life, baby. What's 10 seconds worth of flashing lights and Pokemon cries to start off fights, when the creatures look this cuddly, baby? Let me tell you, by the third gym, my gears were being terminally grinded. Over and over and over. That goddamn combat start music is seared into my brain permanently. Once the charm is worn off, you will realize that combat is severely repetitive, and the illusion of strategy is just that, an illusion. The quote-unquote strategic play is always to use a super effective move, and if you don't have one on the Pokemon currently out, just swap. Copy, paste, and you will do that the entire game. Moves don't really offer any difference besides being a certain element type of a certain power. Stat boosting moves are worthless, as you come to find. Most moves should just kill in one turn, and if not, then swap to a Pokemon that can. That is the strategy. This samey feeling and length just to start combat makes the admittedly few times you do have to grind feel like eternity. I'd rather watch fucking piss on the wall dry than grind in this game. It's awful. Plus, dungeons suck. Any want or desire to explore areas is destroyed by the interruption you receive every fucking 5 steps. But Tony, just use repels, silly Billy. You mean with the limited bag space that can store approximately 2 Pokeballs, 6 Werther's original candies from my grandma, and a roll of unused condoms? No thanks, pal. Also, fuck the Dark Cave. I'll be goddamned if I let any Pokemon of mine waste a move on Flash. Ooh, I forgot to mention the god-awful fuckwit moves that this game has. Absolutely broken moves that should burn in hell. Rap was created by a sick pervert who revels in the idea of a child's time being wasted. Slash is an auto crit move, which is fun to use and absolute bullshit to be used against you. And finally, with a trusty X speed item, X accuracy item, in Horn Drill, you can literally one-shot any enemy in the game or squad wipe any trainer you could ever desire. Absolutely the Biggie Cheese of bullshit moves.
She call me Mr. Bombastic.
Now on to characters. For characters, we have the Rat Bastard and the Fat Bastard. Listen, there are no characters. There are character designs, but no real characters, save for the villains, which I already kind of talked about. The character designs are cool, with gym leaders definitely being the standouts. You have the character from the anime, and also the character from the anime. But, I mean, who could forget the character from the anime? Look, when all you have to go off is designs, you start yearning for some of the personality that we got to see in the show. So let's talk about the Pokemon themselves. I like how this game gives you the opportunity to acquire all 3 starters from the Kanto region. These 3 are some of the most iconic Pokemon of all time, so being able to have them all on your team without resorting to diabolical methods is really cool. I think more of the other games should do this. As far as the designs, these are the cream of the crop. How Game Freak got so many designs so right on the first go around is still mind-blowing to me. We have had 9 generations worth of Pokemon designs, and of the top 10 most popular Pokemon, 5 of them are from the original Pokemon games. Looking at the full list of sprites, I can totally see why. There is so much character packed into each sprite. Each Pokemon is just oozing personality. Every single one of them feels like they could appeal to at least one person who plays this game. There are the cool Pokemon, the cutesy Pokemon, the goofy Pokemon, and the outright lovable Pokemon. There feels like there's something for everyone, and I could reasonably see any of these being your personal favorite. Except Pikachu. If Pikachu is your favorite, more power to you. But for everyone else out there who doesn't need their breakfast mushed up, there's probably design in here for you. My personal favorite is Snorlax, who's from this generation. I don't know, just something about having a sleepy fat fuck of a Totoro-coated monster always appealed to me. The sprites feel so warm, and there's something so cozy about the minimalist design and the way that the old-fashioned color shading adds such a unique retro feel to the art style. You can see the love that went into these sprites and their designs. Now, all of this being said, let me remind you that I've been gushing about Pokemon design and sprites in the characters section because there are absolutely no characters to be found. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There are many games coming up on this list that are definitely gameplay focused rather than character focused, and that can be okay. You just need a strong gameplay loop and other aspects of your game to make up for that lack of character development. So, does Pokemon Yellow make up for it? Look, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I've been a little silly guy for the entire breakdown of this game. Of all the guys out there, I may be, dare I say, the silliest. But enough silliness. This is a serious piece of gaming journalism. And you know what? I'll dive on this grenade. I'll say it. The monster collecting game made to appeal to the widest audience possible? It's a little basic for my taste. I'll bear that cross. I'll be fucking gaming Jesus. You might say, well, what about the kids who love this game and were introduced to RPGs because of this game? Well, call me a pitbull because I fucking hate kids. However, don't get it entirely twisted. On paper, I should hate this game. Absolutely despise it. Yet I don't. Because this game does something fantastic. It captures that childlike wonder that so few games are able to do. I have to give it credit for that. Yet, childlike wonder only goes so far. And I can't help but feel like this raw formula of a game that's presented in Pokemon Yellow can be improved. And that might be because it has, in a plethora of other games that are arguably better suited for this list. You might say, well, I enjoy the original Kanto region. Oh. Well, I like the cozy 8-bit sprite feel. Oh. Well, I like how the Pokemon follows you around. Okay. Well, it's not like Pokemon stories are ever go. Listen, I hate comparing games in a franchise to one another, even though I just did it. Actually, I'm a gaslighter. I fucking love doing that. What I'm trying to say is I think I'm missing the emotional, nostalgic feelings for this game that would warrant it being so beloved. I would understand if you said it's your personal favorite, but if you said it's the best game, or, I don't know, something fucking crazy, like, the 4th best RPG of all time, I would say, you okay? Everything at home okay? I'm giving Pokemon Yellow a D+. This might seem like a brutal score, but remember, I am grading on a curve. In the grand scheme of games, this is definitely above average, but we are comparing the best RPGs of all time. Okay? Okay. So, this is the part where normally I would talk about the next game, but we have a problem. Number 5 on the IGN Top 100 RPG list is World of Warcraft, the infamous MMORPG. This RPG has undeniably left its permanent mark on gaming history, especially RPG gaming history. I mean, Jesus, Leroy Jenkins, anyone?
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy!
And I think Leroy Jenkins serves as the perfect encapsulation of why I don't feel qualified to talk about MMOs for the series. I never played World of Warcraft in its heyday. I never got to experience that specific time period and the culture that went along with World of Warcraft in the mid to late 2000s / early 2010s. Now, I understand World of Warcraft is actually still going relatively strong, and if you are interested in playing this game, there's nothing stopping you, except Blizzard, from starting from scratch and jumping into WoW currently. If you want a breakdown of World of Warcraft or the impact it's had on RPGs, check out the videos I've linked once you finish this video. But enough World of Warcraft. You know my rules on MMOs. So, what could I swap into slot number 5 on the all-time RPG list? What current modern RPG could I put at number 5 that everyone would universally agree belongs there? Whatever could this game... Okay, this bit was never funny. Roll the tape.
Nummer 5.
Baldurs Gate 3. Do you like how I say the title out loud every time like you can't fucking read? Baldurs Gate 3 was developed by Larian Studios and released in 2023 for PC and PS5. That's right, after 23 years, the sequel to Baldurs Gate 2 arrived with universal critical acclaim. This game won just about every goddamn award possible, and for good reason. The first AAA RPG the market has seen in a good long while, and audiences rejoiced. I remember this game being at the top of Steam charts for months after release, and still enjoys a large player base to this day. I played this game in early access and the day it came out, so this will not be my first rodeo in Baldurs Gate 3. This will be the first time I played it fully since it first came out, so I was excited to see how the patches helped fix it. The version I'm playing on is base Baldurs Gate 3 post patch 6. So for those of you from the future watching this video, there may be a definitive edition out, but that's not the version I'm playing right now. Good old vanilla Baldurs Gate 3, a little under a year after it came out. To start off, I feel like I can't talk about BG3 without talking about D&D. Baldurs Gate 2 was based off 2nd edition AD&D, an older system of D&D, but Baldurs Gate 2 used real-time with pause, so it was essentially a completely different combat system that happened to have the same framework as D&D at the time. Its story pulled from D&D lore and was obviously a direct result from D&D during that era. BG3 is also a direct result of D&D, however it's from this era, 5th edition rule set for D&D. 5th edition is highly polarizing, as many older fans of tabletop games dislike the newer D&D rule sets for being too simplified and mass appealing. But those fans don't leave their mold-encrusted basements, so don't even worry about them. D&D 5th edition is the most popular edition D&D has ever released, and is enjoying massive success from a wide consumer base. BG3 takes direct inspiration from newer D&D, almost copying the combat system verbatim, and having its story take place months after a canon D&D module, Descent into Avernus. If any of that interests you, there's a plethora of online content to explain that to you, but for time's sake, I'm not going to cover that. I just want to focus on BG3, and I'll just bring up D&D when relevant. But I think it's important to note that at its core, Baldurs Gate 3 is a direct D&D product. So, with that out of the way, get ready for a long-ass breakdown, and let's dive in. This game is long as hell. This game is beefy as hell. There's too much story to break down altogether, so let's give a quick synopsis. You wake up on an Alithiad ship with a parasitic tadpole lodged in your brain, set to turn you into an Alithiad. Alithiads are a group of monsters in D&D that are kinda like squid men who feast on brains. You escape the ship with other survivors and discover that you have not turned, even though you should have, and you set off to find a cure. Q, shenanigans, and hijinks galore. That is the rough setup to this game, but as I said, this game is over 100 hours long. There's a lot of plot here that could fill an entire 2-hour video, so instead, I'm just going to talk about the story beats I enjoyed. One of my favorite things about this game is the side stories and the multiple ways of resolving them. From this main narrative stems a hodgepodge of other side stories that are so fun and interesting to discover and explore, and they are not always on the main path. These stories make exploring the areas around you worth it, so you can encounter dialogue just from exploring your surroundings. Also, the variety of ways you can handle just about any situation is mind-boggling. If you can think of a way to do something, the game is probably already accounted for it and will react accordingly. I love this game for that. Want to attack Kethrak the moment you see him? Game reacts accordingly. This is just one example of countless many, and it makes every decision you make feel personal because the game reacts in so many different ways. Baldurs Gate 3 also handles role-playing extremely well. There are many shades of good and evil throughout, and there's a custom dialogue option based on the race and/or class you choose, which can add to the believability that it's your character you created that's going through the game, rather than just the stereotypical main character. In a game about a traveling crew of misfits, it's imperative you nail the adventurous aspect to your game, and BG3 succeeds at this. My only gripe in this regard is how the game emphasizes the direness of the tadpole infection you're dealing with, despite there being no actual time limit. This causes you to rest less often at the beginning, even though most character stories and side plots get advanced by resting. So, in actuality, you should be resting as often as possible, but BG3's biggest strengths are in its minor villains. If I busted Chrono Trigger's balls about it, then I gotta bust BG3's. Why the fuck is Kethrak built up so beautifully, one of the most interesting characters in the game, the best villain in the entire game, just to beat him at the end of Act 2 in a 3-act game? What the fuck, Larian? You blew your steamy, hot load way too early. I mean, the guy is voiced by J.K. Simmons, the type of dude to beat your ass, stop midway through, and hit you with the, "Not my tempo." He's so intimidating and voiced to perfection, with one of the best intros I have seen to a villain. Taking an axe to the fucking chesticle to reveal he's unkillable is raw as fuck. And all this just to kill him and replace him with the godlike figure with the Netherbrain. Fucking come on! But to compensate, it provides us with more minor villains like Raphael, Gortash, and Orin. Gortash and Orin never felt like particularly strong villains on their own, but are rather carried by their connection to your other companions. Raphael is a great villain, but he feels too detached from the main story to carry all the weight that's left behind by killing Ketheric. Bummer, but that still doesn't take away from the greatness of these minor villains. The game placates you with memorable characters like Kaga, Nier, and Minthara to serve as little villains on your way to the big bads, and characters like this are sprinkled throughout the entire game. Each act in BG3 feels so distinct, and each feel like they could be their own entire RPG. Act 1 is a fun adventure mystery story with beautiful environments like the Creche, the Underdark, the Forge, and the Wilderness. Act 2 is a dark horror RPG that feels creepy and atmospheric, every step through the Shadowlands, with equally horrific boss fights and characters. Act 3 is your typical big city focused RPG with a new quest behind every door, and some of the highest highs when it comes to boss fights and emotional payoffs for companions. This game has it all in terms of story. I love how you can interact with multiple gods in the game. This makes your character feel important in terms of D&D lore. I also like the focus of the Githyanki in this game. Githyanki are an interesting alien race in D&D that are kind of the mortal enemies of the Ilithiads, as they were originally slaves of the Mind Flayers, so they tie heavily into your main plot. Githyanki are such a unique fantasy race with an interesting culture, so getting to learn more about them was fascinating, especially considering this is not a race that's super common to see in a fantasy setting. They're also set up perfectly with the ambush in Act 1, which can absolutely tear you a new asshole if you're not ready for it, which sets up the Githyanki as a group you don't want to fuck with, in a really cool, applicable way. All of this culminates to the reveal of Orpheus, a key member of Githyanki culture long thought dead, who holds the key to salvation for the entire race, and the tragic twist of irony that he has to face is one of my favorite plot points in the game. All in all, this game is jam-packed with story, and that's just within our main plot. Baldurs Gate 3 is filled with journals and note entries to help flesh out the world itself, if you're into that kind of thing, so you can also delve as deep as you want to go into this story and setting. My only complaint as far as story is the massacre they do to previous Baldur's Gate characters. Viconia is a fucking joke of a boss, although it was cool they have the original voice actor. I don't even mind the way they tie her in with her connection to Shadowheart, or her being evil. I mean, Jesus, according to Baldur's Gate 2, if you romance her, she fucking dies. I just think the way that the game handles her fight itself is poor. Sarevok also seems like he was just brought in for previous Baldur's Gate players to soy face. His fight is not memorable, and he just feels unnecessarily tacked on. Literally, nothing changes if you don't include him. I'll talk about the other returning characters in the companion section, but I just don't think that they handled Sarevok or Viconia well at all. I'm aware that Wizards of the Coast, the company that owns D&D, also did them dirty, so it may not be Larian's fault, but if that's the case, just don't include them. You don't have to. Shout out to the Yawn Easter egg though. Nice little touching way of remembering the best companion of all time. Overall, fantastic story that is full of twists and turns and keeps you invested throughout, despite going so many different places. The presentation of this game is top notch. For all the other games I've talked about so far, it has mainly been me talking about the beautiful art styles and how the games did so much artistically with what was available at the time. At least in the presentation section. Well, no mas. Now we're talking about a modern RPG with AAA graphics on modern hardware. And what do I think? It looks fantastic. It's hard to talk about graphics purely on how realistic they look because I'm not a fucking oracle. I don't know the progression graphics will make and how realistic it will look in 10 years. All I know is how it looks as of now, in the year 2024, the year of the dragon. Or the year of the Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah? Or 2024, the year of the dragon, dragging my little fucking nuts on your face. And the graphics look spectacular. Every scene feels like it could be a cutscene with the amount of high quality graphic fidelity present. Wisps of individual hair can be visible, specific characters' facial features look stunning. Creatures are being represented beautifully in this media that rivals movies. Environments are lush and packed with little details that fleshes out locations. It all looks great. And that's just the graphics. The art design is also spectacular. The color palette of different environments gives them such a distinct feel, like the combination of the dark purple glow with orange lava in the forge, gore and bloody bits in the Temple of Baal that combines black with red, the dark environments accentuated by neon glow in the Underdark. It all adds to the atmosphere of each location. In this game, I don't think there's a single location that doesn't evoke the feelings that the creators intended. Character design also reflects this. The way mind flayers are represented make them feel so creepy and alien, yet so unique and distinct. One of my favorite character designs is Balthazar. Sure, he's a little edgy, but I still remember the first time meeting him. Hearing about this psychotic necromancer all throughout the second act, and to finally stumble upon him, looking like a titular character in a horror movie, makes him feel creepy and disturbing. Plus, the amazing connection of this lifeless, desecrated corpse of Balthazar from Throne of Baal, just for Baldur's Gate 3 Balthazar to seem indifferent towards the body he's in, is so fantastic and adds to how threatening he is. Unfortunately, this is one of the only good tie-ins to previous games, but we don't need to talk about that again. I also like the different sets of armors and clothes that characters can wear. They all look ridiculously dripped out and unique from one another, especially the endgame outfits. Baldur's Gate 3 also helps stave off stagnation in the armor you're using by providing you with color dyes, which can change the palette of your outfits. This little inclusion does so much to prevent feeling tired of the way your character looks when there's a lull in new equipment being found. Plus, it adds just another level of customization that this game is packed with. The music of Baldur's Gate 3 is perfect, with epic orchestral scores backing impactful scenes with catchy little melodies playing in downtimes that adds a whimsical sort of feeling to your adventure. All the scores are beautiful, and some surprisingly catchy. I swear to Muhammad, I had fucking Down by the River stuck in my head for a good week after this game wrapped. Some scores also caught me by surprise when they first played. I mean, what more can be said about Raphael's boss fight music, where he starts fucking singing along to the music while smacking down some ass?
Hell, effects and the wars, curtain falls, but hold your applause.
Respect. The final credits scene, despite being admittedly a little cheesy, made me emotional. And hey, call me a rat, cause sometimes I like a bit of cheese. And the credit song filled that appetite. Combined all together, the presentation of this game sometimes feels more akin to a movie, with the level of detail and design that is littered throughout the runtime. And for presentation, BG3 gets my highest marks. When you start the game, you're given a choice of difficulty from story, normal, tactician, and honor mode. I will go on record and say honor mode is the way to go. Honor mode is set to the hardest difficulty, tactician, with only one save. That save sometimes auto-saves to prevent you from reloading an older save to cheese your way through encounters, and honor mode adds such stakes to the game in a fun and refreshing way. You won't be mindlessly chugging your way through sections and fights. You will be strategizing and thinking carefully on what you say in order to prevent your run from being ruined. The game also isn't crazy difficult, so honor mode's really not that hard to go through. It just changes your playthrough in a way that's for the better, because there's a finality to all your decisions that adds weight to every second of your game. Highs are higher, and overcoming low odds scenarios feels twice as rewarding. Plus, if you die, you can always just turn honor mode off and continue your playthrough with one save, never reloading. I didn't do honor mode for this run because I needed to record footage, but I have played off camera and I highly recommend it. Now that you've chosen difficulty, time for character creation. There are so many character customization options present in this game. All the fucking certified hood classic D&D races are here. We have your typical humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, hobbits, gnomes, along with some deep cut races like Githyanki, Dwergar, which are dwarves but evil, Drow, which are elves but evil, Deep Gnomes, which are gnomes but purple, and the Dragonborn. Again, no goblin race options because D&D game designers fucking hate me, but we can move on. Character customization is great. If there's a character you have in mind that you want to make, you can make it. Face selection is not super in-depth, but there's so many other customization options that this doesn't feel like a problem. Dragonborn have my favorite amount of customization options, and frankly, they just look the coolest. However, my favorite race is without a doubt the Halflings. They look like fucking dildo swaggins. I love them. I'm also a short kinglet, so another point to the Halflings. I mean, look at them. Looks like if The Hobbit took place in Little Italy instead of Middle Earth. This beautiful, circumcised, hairy, bald bastard. A true snub-nosed sex pistol if there ever was one. But enough about this Italian stallion. Let's talk about classes. Again, all your favorite fantasy classes are here, so I won't retread. I have faith you can fucking read the screen. But let me get this out of the way. Magic? It's fucking gay. Magic? You mean what magicians do? Fucking gay, dude. You could be a buff, sexy, succulent muscle man, but you chose to be a gay little nerd who reads scrolls and studies magic? Gay? but actually, I'm a sorcerer. How about you, find the source of why you're so fucking gay, dude? You could be double fisting potions like you're chugging ice cold cides on game day and running into the heat of battle like a true Chad barbarian. But no, you're a dinky little soy-infused dweeb who wears dresses. Fucking dark. Anyways, I chose Wild Mage because it sounded sick. Wild Mage is a sorcerer who has a chance of a Wild Surge going off every time you cast a spell. A Wild Surge is a dice roll that can alter the battlefield in a number of ways, like turning yourself invisible, turning yourself into a sheep, allowing yourself to teleport, and so on and so forth. You can increase the chance of this surge happening by using Tides of Chaos, which gives you advantage on dice rolls. This means you roll 2 dice instead of 1 and you pick the dice with the higher roll, which is actually a really good ability, and this can lead to mayhem during battles, which can be really fun. All this being said, for the first 10 hours of gameplay, I never got a single surge. Don't know if I'm the unluckiest bastard to ever live or what. I was using Tides of Chaos too, like all the time. If I had a roll to pick my nose, fucking use Tides of Chaos. Roll to pick dingleberries out of my swamp ass, Tides of Chaos. Do a deception roll to lie to myself that I picked the right class, fucking Tides of Chaos. That being said, at the end of the day, I was still a sorcerer, so my character felt really strong and really fun to play. I just may have overestimated the fun factor of the random chance that Wild Mage brings to battle. It's all fun and games until you accidentally turn your team into cats and dogs at the very beginning of Raphael fight. Oh, fucking suck my wiener, dude. Eventually, you can put this curse on your opponents and cause them to have wild surges, and there was no better feeling in the entire game than causing Gortash to morph himself into a sheep. Really fucking fun. All of this is just one of 3 subclasses of Sorcerer, and Sorcerer is but one of 12 classes in the game, all feeling just as in-depth as this one. There are 46 possible subclasses to choose from, and every class feels like it had a really fun and unique level scaling system that rewards the player at just about every level up. You can also multi-class or combine different classes, so whatever character archetype you want, you can probably build. That's where this game's strength comes from. The absolute freedom. No race restrictions on class, no restrictions on combinations of classes. The player is given the utmost freedom and told to go wild, all while maintaining a really great power curve. Each individual level feels impactful. Finally reaching level 5 and being able to cast Fireball feels like such a powerful leap in ability, and that's just from level 4 to 5 for magic classes. Each class is full of fun and has its own unique benefits that are bound to appeal to at least someone who plays the game. And the loot! You know I'm a little loot goblin. This game may surpass Baldurs Gate 2 as having some of the most fun loot to date. Every piece has its own unique benefit that always goes a layer deep than just flat increase in power. They have some unique ability, or at least some limited use outside of stat increases. The legendary magic staff, that I won't even try to pronounce, that lets you cast a spell for free and can change elemental damage and provide a high level spell to use in line with that element. There is a trident that returns when thrown. There is armor that lets you fly. Each piece of equipment feels viable in an endgame build, and every time you gain one of these pieces of equipment, you feel the boost in power because you can take advantage of the cool new abilities it grants your character. They also feel just as iconic as the original Baldur's Gate 2. Lae'zel's legendary silver sword, the Night Song spear that Shadowheart has been chasing the entire game, the helm of Balduran, and the robe of the weave that gives your wizard the homeless drip. It's all so memorable. This equipment, combined with the leveling system, leads to one of the most satisfying progression systems in an RPG to date. Now on to combat. Baldur's Gate 3 has the best implementation of D&D, period. Look, there may be games that more faithfully adapt D&D mechanics, but Baldur's Gate 3 implements most of D&D, and every change it makes to fit the video game format is for the best. So not only does it fully grasp the feeling of D&D combat, but it arguably does it even better. I'm not going to go over D&D combat mechanics because I'm just going to assume you know them, and if not, tough tits. But the way Baldur's Gate 3 adds environmental reactivity perfectly makes up for what D&D lacks in a video game. Combining water and electricity leads to double damage. Pushing enemies off cliffs is a viable method of damage. Using telekinesis to throw an enemy into furniture is just as fun as it sounds. By moving D&D to a visual 3D environment, it adds so much to combat by allowing the environment to react to the battle itself. Grease if hit by fire will explode. This makes every combat encounter feel varied because each zone can take place on multiple levels with multiple hazards surrounding yourself and the enemy. BG3 also has phenomenal sound design. Every sound adds an extra oomph to attacks, whether it be the whooshing of a sword swing, the crackling of electricity with a lightning spell, the whip of a bowstring on a bow and arrow, or the skadoosh of a fireball. Attacks feel powerful in large part due to the sound design. This feedback gives an intensity to combat, and it really does make your character feel like a powerful individual in terms of the video game universe you exist within. This game also has some of the most memorable bosses of all time. I've already gone on about how good many aspects of the Raphael fight are, but the combat itself is also insanely fun. BG3 does a good job of providing ways to make bosses powerful without feeling cheap. Raphael is a perfect example of this by being just an overall tough boss to beat, with no real gimmicks. He just feels appropriately powered. He's built up the entire game, and the final fight feels in line with what the game has set you up for. This leads to a fantastic payoff. Auron has the unstoppable condition, which makes her indestructible for a certain number of hits, so she's guaranteed to at least get some damage off on you no matter what, which can make that fight more interesting. Answer, the big undead dragon, is just a good old dragon fight with an open setting and a relatively fair your guys versus mine fight that can be challenging if you're not entirely ready. Act 3 is full of boss fights that combine emotional payoffs with interesting battle mechanics, like Lorokin on top of the tower, which serves as a neat little final bow on top of the Night Song story arc, and simultaneously is just a fun boss fight. Viconia is kinda the same way, with her fight being surprisingly challenging in an emotional climax to Shadowheart's story. I just hate how she transforms into a wolf. What the fuck? I get that it's to take advantage of Shadowheart's fears, but why not have a different character do that? Viconia has never been known as a shapeshifter. Plus, she's more challenging in drow form, so it feels like an out-of-character misstep by Larian. But back to great boss fights now. Don't even get me started on Catharak. Such a cool fight, and a perfect ending to Act 2. I just wish it wasn't the ending to Catharak, but it is what it is. I mean, you get to fight the fucking avatar of a god as the final form of that fight. A giant skeleton. Fucking amazing. However, there is one major complaint that kind of comes from this fight, but it's not the only one that suffers from it. I wish this game had more faith in its combat system, especially in Act 2. I like the idea of talking your way out of a fight or two, or even convincing what should be a boss to unalive themselves. That's a cool feeling, and I remember social media raving about how cool it was that they could do that. And I agree. You're just allowed to sidestep way too much in Act 2 through conversation. There are some cool creepy bosses like Undead Doctor Dude or the fat fuck of a bartender that most players will never experience because it's just too easy to talk your way out of. You can even skip a whole half of Ketharak's fight through dialogue checks. Fuck that. That fight's great, especially when all phases are intact and not skipped. Either make the checks much harder or make it a win-lose situation. You should not be able to talk your way out of a fight and still get the boss's reward, like their equipment for doing so. It should be one or the other. You fight and earn loot, or you talk your way out of it and miss out on that stuff, but you don't have to fight them. Too often you're equally rewarded, so why not just talk your way out of it? Like I said, the boss designs and fights are great in Act 2. There are just far too many you can outright skip, which I think sucks. I understand the appeal of talking your way out of some of these, so you can keep some intact like your gear, but maybe make the doctors a little bit harder. That's all. Combat as a whole, though, is one of the most addicting systems I've played, and I highly recommend. Baby Jesus. Finally, on to companions. Let me get this out of the way up front when it comes to companions. This game is horny. All the butt-fucking and nut-sucking you could ever dream of. Wanna fuck a bear? Get in line, partner. Wanna fuck a squid man? Beat you to it. Wanna fuck a weird alien? Me first. Wanna fuck drow twins? Sus as hell, but you do you. How fuckable or how fun it is to fuck a companion will not impact this list whatsoever. So if you have a favorite character because of how hot their 3D rendered body is, that's on you, buddy. I will be avoiding that conversation at all costs. This will just be based off the characters themselves, not based on how erect they make me. That being said, if that was the case, Squidman gets S tier. Now, let's get started. You know the rules. Also, one last thing of note, I will mention the class of each character, but keep in mind you can make any character whatever class you want, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, here we go actually. Last is Minsk. Look, I like Minsk, and I think they actually kind of nailed the humor and feel of his character. I just think he comes way too late. No one will actually use him, and he has no real impact on the plot. He just feels like fan service, which is fine, he just won't be at the top of the companions list. His hunter subclass of ranger is really fun at high levels though, so if I could have gotten him earlier, maybe I would have used him, but we'll never know. Next is Halsin. He kind of became an icon for Baldur's Gate 3 when it was revealed you could fuck him as a bear, which I respect the balls of doing. It's just a bummer that that's the most interesting thing about his character. This coming from a guy who used him in my party the first time I played this game. I love the Druid Circle of the Moon subclass. Turning into an owl bear is loads of fun. It's not the class that's the problem, it's him. Druids too often in games are just the most boring, milquetoast, tree-hugging hippie bitches of all time. They spew the same harmony of nature dialogue game after game after game. And even if it is coming from the sexy buff lips of an angel that is Halsin, it's still just as boring. The way Halsin tries to swerve this reputation is by being ungodly horny, but unfortunately that's just not enough. plus you get him late into Act 2. Lame. Next is our first official origin companion, Will. I fucking despise Will. I know there was a movement that didn't like Will just based off his race, and I just want to say, first and foremost, I hate him on an even deeper level. I'm the biggest hater. I love the Warlock class in D&D. It's a person who is given their magical powers by some sort of entity, usually a devil or a demon. That's really cool. That's an awesome background. This feels pre-built to make an interesting character, because you have to wonder, what deal with the devil did they make for their power? That's an interesting concept. Will's secret deal with the devil is that he was just such a good guy, he sold his soul to protect even more people. Aww, fucking pfft. Will is given the keys to be an interesting character, and this motherfucker refuses to drive. Also, his quote-unquote change into a demon is such a non-transformation. Make him look truly weird and creepy and devilish. There's lots of interesting D&D designs you could have gone with. His current transformation just looks like a tiefling fucked a goat. If he was a paladin or something, I could maybe give him a pass for how much of a goody two-shoes he is, but being a warlock makes him such a missed opportunity. Next. Jaheira is a repeat character from the original duology, and she's handled extremely well, actually. She serves as a kind of wise elderly figure who still has her cutting honesty that makes her a pleasure to interact with. She also has quite a bit of significance to the plot. Her class is super weak, and she actually is quite fragile if you don't reclass her, so that's a bummer. But she feels better suited as just a camp personality who has interesting things to say, and interesting bits of lore to provide your character. Really solid job of translating her character as well. Next is Minthara. She is so great. Her paladin subclass is stupid strong and fun to play as, plus her background as a drow provides such an interesting look into how she is the way that she is. Just by virtue of being an interesting D&D race, you can add so much to a character. Originally, you could only unlock her by killing the Tiefling Grove and losing half your companions, which would have pushed her way down the list, but with recent updates, you can still be a good person and get her by knocking her out the first time you fight her. And that's a godsend, because all of her reasoning and dialogue reveals why she is so detached and bloodthirsty. It's part of her culture, which is very much kill or be killed. This insight into drow culture is a lot of the reason I like Viconia so much in Baldur's Gate 2, and it's just as interesting 23 years later. Also, knowing Minthara as the stone cold killer and seeing how she fears Orin adds so much to Orin's character. It makes her even more threatening than just the shifting scenes, which already made her pretty fucking creepy. But Minthara's involvement with her makes her seem terrifying, because if she can scare Minthara, that speaks loads to her character. That's how good of a character Minthara is. She makes other characters better just by being involved with them. That being said, she does come midway through Act 2, otherwise she would be even higher. Next is Gale. Some people love Gale, and I gotta ask, why? Gale's okay. I don't hate him, but he seems like such a meh personality. His character story is actually super interesting with his involvement with the orb that is essentially a nuke inside him that could go off any second, and his relationship with Mystra, the literal god of magic. It's just him that I don't love. Oh, he's the quippy guy who says fun little quips and puns. Okay, I've seen Marvel movies too. I get it, dude. The wizard class can be fun to use, it's just kind of a bummer that he's the character using it. You get him at the very start, and like I said, he has an interesting subplot. I just feel like he himself is, I don't know, missing something. He's just too granola. Quippy human wizard. Maybe change his race. I'm not talking the Twitter guy, but I mean like his fantasy race. There are a lot of interesting races with pre-built personalities and cultures that I think would add maybe an extra layer to Gale that he's missing. I don't really know. For right now, he just feels mid. But like I said, I love his story and his side plots, and the cool magic scenes that you can get with him. Okay, from here on out, all characters are top-notch in my opinion. Next is Owlbear Cub. He's just a cute little guy. Actually, next is Karlach. I love Karlach. The barbarian class may be a little lacking in what they bring to the table in terms of abilities they get, but god damn it, they are strong and extremely fun to use. Plus, Karlach is the one using them. Karlach is dripping with personality. She's like a himbo but a girl. You might be thinking, a female himbo is a bimbo, Tony. To which I'd say, I know that, you fucking idiot, but she's not a bimbo. She's more like a shimbo. The type to chug a six-pack of beer, smoke a cigar, and elbow drop herself through the nearest beer pong table. A Gronkowski archetype, if you will. The power in this, however, is the fact that it is sort of a ruse. Sure, she's a cheery, peppy person naturally, but deep down she's terrified. She has an artificial heart that's burning her alive, and if she can't fix it, she will die. She gained this heart by being sold to an archdevil of hell by one of the story's main antagonists, Gortash, who pretty much looked after her when she was younger. So she escapes hell but is put on a ticking time clock. The entire story, she acts like she's not bothered by it at all, but we see glimpses of how much it's actually affecting her. All this culminates into hands down the best scene in the game, in my opinion. Her monologue post-Gortash is emotional, it's impactful, and it's beautifully delivered by the voice actor. It actually made me a bit emotional, and it's well worth it to bring her along when you fight Gortash so you can see this scene. The only reason she isn't a bit higher is because her story is lacking just a little bit throughout the entire game. Next is every gamer's favorite imaginary goth girlfriend, Shadowheart. Shadowheart is great. She's kind of the straight man with a cutting sense of sarcasm, akin to Jaheira in the original game, but her character story is much better. She is directly tied to the main plot, while her personal story revolves around being a follower of a cult-like religion known as Worshippers of Shar. This is interesting because the game explores many interesting concepts such as blind faith, faith in oneself, and duty to those they follow through this lens, all while beautifully tying her personal story into the main plot through the artifact. She also has so many great emotional climaxes to her story, like the Night Song in Act 2, the Temple of Shar and her parents in Act 3. Her entire story is brimming with these emotional climaxes. Her payoffs are handled beautifully, and I really enjoy how you can just let her make her own decisions during these scenes. It adds to the feeling that she is her own character, and not bound to follow whatever you, the protagonist, commands her to do. Plus, every party needs a cleric, and her personality is intoxicating, making for fun conversations and banter with other party members. The next two are so neck and neck that I feel like this order could change on any given day. Fuck it, Asterion is next. Now, I don't have Asterion on this side because he's so baby girl coded. Rather, he feels like such a fun companion that strays from the personalities of the others. Everyone in this game can be a tad bit serious, with the occasional witty or funny remarks. He is completely self-serving, and it's always really funny to see the patented Asterion disapproves after, giving a piece of food to a homeless puppy. Doing this video has made me realize a couple things about myself. One, that apparently I enjoy class types that lead to random chance probabilities, like Wild Mage and Setzer from Final Fantasy VI. Neat. Oh, and also apparently I love the cunty lord archetype like Setzer, Magus, and now Asterion. Don't know what that means for my sexuality, but, some questions better left unanswered. Asterion plays the role as dastardly vampire companion who loves being evil to a T, and his voice acting is my favorite in the game. I know some people hate this about him, and I gotta ask, why do you hate fun? He was the only character in this game that could consistently crack me up, make me audibly laugh because of his lines and the way that they are delivered. But don't get me wrong, despite this smooth-talking comedian, he has serious issues. His role with his previous master, Cazador, has permanently scarred him, emotionally and physically, and has taken over his life through seeking revenge. He's power-hungry to prevent anyone from ever abusing him again, and this leads to an interesting character, with another one of my favorite climaxes, when he goes absolutely sicko mode on Cazador. Every party needs someone to unlock doors, and Asterion is the person for this job. Along with the chaos he brings, leads to a must-play companion. Finally, Lae'zel. I've talked about how much I love the Githyanki in this game, so it goes without saying that the companion who gives you even more insight into the subculture is gonna rank highly. She's just your typical fighter, which might be unironically the strongest class in the game, and she has all the unique Githyanki racial abilities, making her the best companion in combat. However, combat is not the only reason I love her character. She's your typical fish out of water stereotype, but what makes her interesting is her views on life. She blindly follows the Githyanki to the ends of the earth, and even when her entire culture betrays her, she just as quickly jumps onto the next beacon of hope in Orpheus. I love how the game handles that switch too, with your character being able to bring up this sudden change that she just kind of brushes off. The game doesn't answer the question of why is she so quick to jump ship, but rather implies that her entire life requires some sort of cause to follow. This is such an interesting character to explore with views on life that are so alien that every conversation with her feels like you're learning more about the Githyanki and Lae'zel in return. I mean, Jesus, the entire creche is dedicated to fleshing out the Githyanki, which gives you more information as to why Lae'zel is the way she is. Of all companions, she feels most like she would be the main character, if you, the main character, did not exist. And so, that's all of them. All of the companions. You thought? Bonus round, baby. The Dark Urge. Listen, I know technically the Dark Urge is not a companion, but it is an origin character, so I figured I'd better cover it. I love the Dark Urge. Dirge is a character suffering from amnesia with an urge to commit brutal acts of violence. This is eventually revealed to be because the Dirge is a ball spawn, like your character from Baldurs Gate 1 and 2. I love this reveal, and it's tied into the original games. So much, in fact, that this kind of feels like the definitive way to play. It adds so much additional content to the game that is wasted by not picking it. One of my favorite characters in Baldur's Gate 3 is Sclerelatus, the goblin butler that follows you. The voice acting is great, and you know how much I get down with the old gobos. Additionally, you're not even tied to a class or race. It is fully customizable. And I just gotta say, I fucking hate this about the character. Warning, spicy take incoming. Make Dirge a canon companion. That's right, not the canon main character, but a canon companion. I remember when the Dirge got announced, and I saw that first image of a white dragonborn in sorcerer robes with a goblin on his back. I thought to myself, this is gonna be the best goddamn companion in gaming history. And it would have been if he was canon. His default look is so cool, and with the boring ass other magic users we get, like Gale and Will, having a sorcerer companion who is a ball spawn would be an awesome tie-in to the original by having a ball spawn in your party that's not even you. You could sway him to be good or evil like most other characters, or if you wanted to play as a ball spawn, play him as an origin. I get why Dirge is customizable because that makes it gender fluid and causes more players to go the Dirge route, but fuck it, take that risk. Imagine how cool that original reveal would be. You first encounter him and go, oh great, another fucking geriatric on the team. Then you come across a cute little squirrel and he boots it through the uprights? That would have been fucking legendary. Plus it's implied he's canon as you find his body if you play as a Tav, a regular custom character, so I just wish they would have gone all the way. But I still love the Dirge as is, and it's my favorite origin character. Whew, we done. That was a lot. Easily the longest section thus far, and I apologize for that. But we have made it to the end of Baldur's Gate 3. So, what am I going to rate it? Am I going to do a bait and switch and talk wonders about this game just to give it a low grade? Or am I going to be a prisoner of the moment and overrate this game only to regret it later? I'm going to give Baldur's Gate an S+. Listen, if you held a gun to my head and forced me to describe my perfect RPG, I'd say, why so fucking aggressive? Jesus, you can just ask, you know? Like, you don't have to... Wait, is that a real fucking gun? If you ask me to list the qualities of a perfect RPG, it is downright astounding how many boxes this game checks. Full customizability of a character with any class or race? Check. Memorable soundtrack? Check. Cinematic quality graphics? Check. Great cast of companions? Another check. Great gear and loot galore? You bet your sweet bippy that's a check. Game that reacts to the decisions I make and it feels like I can get fully lost role-playing a character I created? Fucking check. I'm confident when I say this game will age like wine, and I'll put my highly esteemed gamer reputation on the line to prove it. And that's about it. And
Well, in it.
with that, the first 5 games on the IGN Top 100 RPGs of all time are out of the way. Praise Allah. Here's the tier list that I will update per video of where I rank all the games I've judged so far, so here you go. I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much if you stuck around for the entire video. This is the first one I've ever made, and I'm excited to work on honing my production quality and making the best videos possible. If you like this one, then you better subscribe because we have many more games to play. We will only get better with the video production quality, so I hope you'll join me on that journey. Stay tuned. Deuces.